And this is Mike Fader, Sirius XM Left 127. We have a guest this hour. No surprise, right? But he's written a very interesting book. But first, as always, if you want to get in touch with me, you have to go to Fader Files, my website, FEDERFILES.com, and you can get on my mailing list and get in touch with me to tell me how much you loved this show. I don't want to hear anything else. And also a parallel kind of political blog that I have. It's called Occupied Territory, about the United States. And just go to Facebook and Occupied Territory on Google will get you right there. And it's a constant sort of political conversation. You can join, feel free. Our guest today is Barbara Garson, who has got a new book out called Down the Up Escalator, How the 99% Live in the Great Recession. And hello.
Hello, how are you?
Okay, how you doing?
I'm fine.
That's good. Let me read some of your background here, and then we'll talk about the book. Barbara Garson is the author of 3 books, All the Livelong Day, The Meaning and Demeaning of Routine Work, The Electronic Sweatshop, How Computers Are Transforming the Office of the Future, and most recently, Money Makes the World Go Round. One investor tracks her cash through the global economy. And she's written several plays, including MacBird, which I saw live.
Where did you see it? In New York?
Down in the Village somewhere.
Oh, right.
Where was that? Where it was?
Yes, it was in the Village Gate.
Yeah, that's where I saw it.
Stacy Keach, Bill Devane,
right.
Cleavon Little. It was all of them. It was their first acting.
Sure, I remember that. So see, we're talking on the same chronological level here. So.
No, we're the same age, and your audience is full of young people who don't. We might as well skip that. They don't remember that one.
Well, I'm telling them anyhow.
Okay.
She's written several plays, including MacBird. I mean, you got to learn, right? And this is a great play, MacBird. And the Obie Award-winning The Dinosaur Door.
That was a children's play when my child was that age. And you know something?
Yeah.
We used a bunch of, it was a class trip to the Natural History Museum. We used a bunch of children from my building, kind of just rounded up kids.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out recently someone phoned me and said, I'm the head of the Vin Diesel fan club.
Yeah.
And I said, who's Vin Diesel? And it turned out Vin Diesel was one of the children in that play. His name at that time was Mark Vincent.
Huh, interesting.
And another of the kids was Timmy Robbins.
Oh.
Timmy didn't stay, though.
Okay, so now we have established our geriatric credentials.
Exactly.
Which is, okay, so the book, Down the Up Escalator, How the 99% Live in the Great Recession, is it's not a book full of statistics and figures. I mean, I have economists on here all the time. It's basically you went out in the country, starting in New York and all over the rest of the country, and interviewed people at different levels or having different kinds of jobs to see how they were bearing up. And since we do have economists on here all the time, I noticed that economists, when I look in the papers, like in the Times, it'll say, economists see upsurge. You know, and I'm thinking to myself, where do they live? What world are they from? Because, you know, you look around, I look around, my listeners look around, you don't see any upsurge, you see a downsurge.
I know, I go crazy when I listen to our public radio and the public radio news and television announcing the market as though the market were the economy, when, alas, it's turned into sort of the opposite of the economy.
I know, and people don't really seem to get that. I mean, but this is an old thing. I mean, even I, who know better for decades now, once in a while when I look at the business section of the paper, my eye first goes to the top of the page where it says, you know, the stock market, what the stock market is, and to see if it's up. I'm supposed to, as an American, feel better, but you know...
Probably,
you know...
in some... Well, you never had a real job. I was going to say you probably have a little of your IRA in the stock market.
No.
Huge amount.
No, I've had plenty of 9-to-5s, believe me.
Oh, okay.
So I know. And also tried to live as a freelancer for a long time. So... Yeah, but still, you look at it because this is what you were saying. In other words, it's ingrained in you to see if that the stock market somehow represents prosperity, but it represents prosperity for some very rich people or large pension funds or hedge funds. You know.
And it's come to the point where, unfortunately, it's opposite prosperity. There are times in history when capital can be invested and they make profits, and they're also employing people and doing things. But we got into this recession because of a situation where ordinary pay was going down, people didn't have any, or people's wages were stagnant, and profits were going up, and banks had so much money they didn't know what to do with it. I mean, a bank can't keep its money in the bank.
Mm-hmm.
So they started, it's as if they said to working people, you know what? This all started in the 70s. Instead of paying you to buy what you produce, we'll lend you the money.
Mm.
And they went to one lending scheme after another, started with, car loans, and it went to credit card loans for your ordinary expenses, and then it got into that crazy scheme of lending money to buy houses they couldn't possibly afford, and then securitizing the mortgages and selling them back and forth to each other. All of this to get around the problem that we have a consumer economy. I know you will not have an economist on this time. But we buy and sell 70% of what we make to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And if they do this brilliant trick they've been doing of giving us less and less money, who's going to buy the stuff? Productivity went soaring up by almost double since the 70s, and wages stay flat. So they had all this money, and you may not think the problem, we're so awash with money we don't know what to do. You may not think of it as a bad problem, but it is a bad problem if you're a bank.
Well, once upon a time, far away and long ago, or whatever it is, long ago and far away, they would give it to, let's say, a business, a small business, or a farmer, or somebody to build a business that employed people in this country, right? That's what a bank was supposed to do.
If they've done that wonderful trick of breaking the unions and making the wages lower and lower, I have some bankers in my book. And they're not particularly villains. And the guy, who made loans to mid-sized corporations explained that you can make the interest zero if he doesn't have customers. He's not going to borrow. When the orders come in, that's when he turns the switch. And so, if absent the ability to lend to businesses to produce for real customers, they get into this spinning the money business. Just, it's essentially, look, if I don't have $10 to buy something this year, how am I going to pay you? And you were going to lend me the money? How am I going to have $15 to pay you back next year with interest? Bankers aren't really stupid. They just had to avoid that problem because they had to get rid of the money.
Well, what about getting rid of it What about taking the money, that's what they used to do, and finding, legitimate industries that employed Americans?
That's what I'm saying. In America, our legitimate industries sell to us. And if if another part...
Oh, so in other words, there was too much stuff, and they had to loan money to people to buy it.
Right, and that's because of the cutting of wages starting in the 1970s. Used to be in America, it really was the land of opportunity. Used to be from about 1820 to 1970, starting in 1820 only because that's when the figures started to be collected, that wages went up, real hourly wages went up every decade in America. There wasn't always a lot, there was times of unemployment, but they weren't also pushing the wages down. Then they got this brilliant thing. Wow, we can really crack this thing. We can crack these wages. We can send them down, and they really did. And
so is that what a monumental short-sighted thinking on their part then, right?
Yes, or maybe, maybe there isn't a them. I'm not.
Well, you know how that works. I mean, it sort of adds up even though it doesn't intend to.
Right, yeah.
But I mean, so it really is very bad thinking in a way.
And we're getting out of the recession in the same way. I mean, these people that I follow,
right?
Like the four delightful the people in New York.
Pink Slip Club, you call them.
Yes, they find each other in church. Happen to be a Wiccan church, but I can't help that.
It's all the same anyhow.
In church, they discover that more than one of them has lost a job, so they say, let's form a little club, a Pink Slip Club, to keep each other occupied. And, how often do we have 3-4 weeks of freedom to see the city? These are people that like Seinfeld. I gave them Seinfeld names because they love New York. They're in and out of each other's apartment all the time around Lincoln Center. And they make about $50,000 a year, and they're not world beaters. They're just people who do, one of them is an editor on a trade journal, one of them does insurance adjusting. She's in an office all day. One of them does layouts for textbooks. And they lose their jobs, and they figure it'll be a few weeks. And hell, it wasn't fun to lose their job, and they did feel awful at the moment.
Yeah.
Their descriptions are wonderful of that sort of frozen moment when they... But they figure they'll find others, and they might as well enjoy free concerts and things like that in the city for a couple of weeks. It took me a long time to write this book. I saw them as newly unemployed, and I saw them become the long-term unemployed, and now I never finished this book. I'm still calling them back, putting what happened to them on my website, and now two of them have part-time jobs at half their previous wage. They just can't live. They're taking it out of their... They're not starving. In fact, I'm a very cheap person, so I'm always amazed that all the unemployed people I speak to still get takeout coffee and don't carry a thermos.
I was going to ask you about that. I mean, I'm reading the book here. I'm looking at the book, and, long-term unemployment, whatever. And so they have part-time jobs. I mean, these people. But in New York City, I mean, we'll get to other people in other parts of the country here. But in New York City, it's like in a lot of other places, but here more. The rents keep going up and up and up.
One person took in a roommate. The other one is going through her, really coming toward the bottom of her IRA. Going through her retirement savings. One of them, as I mentioned, actually the one who got a job only because she didn't care about the money. She had some money, which she mentioned. She just liked to go out to work. And now, so she's living... It's as if she's living on her Social Security before she's eligible to Social Security. But their capabilities, because these started as really terrific people. Not terrific, nice people and capable people. And just to watch them go down like that was pretty...
Well, I mean, you're keeping in touch with them. It's been about, 3 years since you started?
Yes, I guess from them I'm on to about 2 years.
So eventually,
unemployed.
But eventually, these people. I mean, how old are they roughly?
They started all in their. One was in his mid-40s, and the other was just about the beginning of their 50s.
So,
how old do you think the Seinfeld people were?
Oh, how they were when they were in that TV show?
Yeah, how old were they?
I don't know, early 30s.
Okay. Well,
something like that.
People got older just as I felt it over the years. But, they didn't have children, so they were more into enjoying the city. Not extravagantly. In fact, I put down who I also named Elaine and Jerry, because one of them was Geraldine.
Yeah.
And I also put down, I just wondered how the Seinfeld people were really living. These people were spending their salaries of about $50,000 a year.
So now, but eventually, what's going to happen? Like in a year or 2 years or 3 years, what happens to these people?
Back with mother.
Mother at their age?
I know there's one person who is taking some money from his parents.
Really?
But I don't know what's going to happen. And there's an even more strange thing about this recession. In other recessions, it has been true that the people who lost jobs never, on the average, didn't, there's been studies, they don't quite catch up. They're not where they would have been. They're like 10 years below their predicted salary. But these people are still unemployed, and not only that, but the jobs they had that they're not going to get back are also being cut up so that even if they got that job back, it doesn't exist. In other words, right through the course of this recession, businesses have been taking these sort of semi-professional and professional jobs and making them hourly, turning them into,
they're part-time jobs too, so they don't have to pay the benefits.
Right.
Yeah.
And which means that we're coming out of the recession in the same direction we went in, which is lower and lower and lower wages, not just for the people that lost out during this recession, but for the people
Well, so that the recession is really good for people who are at the higher levels of corporations, who have a lot of money, who live on investments, and they keep investing in things. I mean, it's good for bankers. It's good for the heads of corporations, CEOs.
Well, this is different than other recessions too. You say that as if it were always true: the rich get rich and the poor get poor. But normally, during a normal recession, if there is such a thing as a normal recession, they are pretty normal. They come along often.
They do.
During a normal recession, there's a slight reversal. Companies start taking less profits, they compete on price, and they wait to start up again. And the unemployed get employed afterwards, and there's a slight reversal of the amount of the total income, which is smaller, that goes to profit, and the amount that goes to wages during a recession. It takes a temporary Robin Hood turn. And that's part of the recovery process. Here, we went in with inequality increasing like it never had in the United States.
Right.
And it's continued. It's now, profits are 25 to 30% high. I read the Financial Times. That's where I get all my statistics. Love that paper. They're 25 to 30% higher at the end of the recession than they were at the beginning. I mean, it's officially ended a couple of years ago.
Officially, but that's another thing. I mean, who are these officials? Because when my hometown paper is the same as yours. It's the New York Times, right?
Why didn't we should have done this in person?
Well, you could have come down here, except I'm kind of a hermit and I'm reclusive. I like to,
Oh, I didn't know that.
No, that's okay. It's a condition which is never going to go away, and I deal with it. I'm happy with it. It's a long-term recession of my emotional. So anyhow,
you can tell I go out. I love going out.
I can see that. So I'm glad you're not here. It would be too much for me.
I'm sorry that their stories are so sad this time. I never had such a sad book to write.
Oh well, I mean, at one point here you're talking to, and I can understand this because I did a lot of volunteer work in the city at a senior center. And, all the people come in there, most of the people come in there with their home care workers. And these people, some of them, they, like in every profession or every job, there are people who are slackers. They don't do very well. They don't pay attention. But some of these people were like angels on earth for these people, And you interview a home care worker, your home. Right?
I met a woman in court. I didn't go to meet her. Went to meet someone else with her lawyer. And this woman was up there, and sort of her case was ending, and she said to the judge, "Your Honor, when will this happen? When will they come for me?" And the judge pointed to the lawyer of the banks, and he said, "The house belongs to them." And I asked if I could interview her, and she started telling me about her son who was killed and how she started to fall back in paying off the house. And then she had to go right back to, she was a home care attendant.
Yeah.
She had to go right back to her job, even though she had no idea where she'd sleep that night. And she agreed to meet me, and we met at a restaurant that evening. And I'm talking to someone who's saying, I hear the sheriff holds your stuff for 10 days.
Oh, boy.
I mean, she doesn't know where she's going to be the next day. And I'm listening to this story. She once owned this house outright. She did make a foolish decision to go for one of those mortgage schemes so she could put money down on a house for her children, including the one who was killed. And then she fell behind to bury him, his funeral. And I'm listening to her, and at one point she says to me, she thanks me for listening to her, as if I'm doing her some favor. And she says that she almost didn't come, but she prayed on it, she said. And then I said to myself, she can't hurt me. She's so tiny. This woman was very large, and she could really move her patients around. And she was very concerned about patients. And, oh, my God, that just made me start to cry, that she thinks I can't hurt her because I'm little. And I'm starting to cry, and she says, I'm crying. I said, I'm crying. She's thanking me for writing, and I'm crying because my books never do anybody any good.
Well...
And she says, I understand. My patients all die. So, she's a home care person who gets people at the very end. Well,
the book does people good because, I have the same conversation with my wife all the time. I know this has turned into a coffee clutch, but what's the difference? people could listen, they could turn us off. I'm always telling my wife, I come down here to the station, to do this show, and I have all the guest experts on. I get passionate. I talk about the president, how he's doing everybody in, about drones. I talk about the latest, invasion of our lives by culture busting corporations. I go on and on and on and on. I try to bring people on here who are optimistic, because I'm not, right? So I deliberately have positive guests on. And then every week I complain to her. I said, what good does it do? Look at you, pick up the newspaper, and things get worse all the time. Am I doing any good? I'll tell you what she tells me, because it's true.
Oh, good. I need to hear it.
Okay. All right. So you can, you need to keep doing this. It's important that people write books like this thing. And by the way, if you're just tuning in, it's called Down the Up Escalator, How the 99% Live in the Great Recession. And it's by Barbara Garson. Garson. One of the reasons it's important to do it is because at the very least, there are millions of people out there who are in bad shape or in similar shape to cases that we're talking about. And they want to know that other people are at least in the same boat and that somebody's paying attention. Well, that's all, just to start.
Why this lady thanked me as if I was doing her a favor.
Well, also because, in the aggregate, you have to hope that if people write books like yours, or if I do shows like this, that somebody is going to hear it who will, one day or another, they will get together and they will try to change things. Because you have to know, after all the things you've written, and I have to know after the business I'm in, that if you don't tell people things, they'll live in total darkness and ignorance. Not like we know everything, but I mean, you bring this information to people. Otherwise, you look around and you see nothing but misery, but you have to know that there's other things out there. So,
I guess the people that I meet are sort of resilient in some ways, so that's the answer. So I even got back to that woman, and she found a living job, but she had to bring with her another sick old man she was taking care of. It was so crazy.
But I mean, it's important. It's important to do things like you're doing, and maybe like what I'm doing here, because people sooner or later, if they don't just feel better knowing everybody's in the same boat, they're you're gonna hit somebody, or people are gonna hear it, who will sign a petition, who will show up someplace, who will vote for a third party instead of the same old corporate two parties.
God, that's what Nick Bird was about, really. People thought it was anti-Johnson, but it was really saying Johnson and Kennedy were the same, in the hope that in the 60s, when we were really strong, we would be able to break away to something independent. But you're right. It's important what we do, but I used to think because we were things would get better and better. Now, I never thought I would, having lived through the 60s, write a book about things moving down. And so my hope is that it's cyclical. That you'll use your energy to move back up again.
Well, in this case, it's not just going to be an economic cycle. If it's going to be a cycle, it's going to
cycle of cyclical. We'll fight again.
Yeah, it's got to be a kind of total awareness cycle. It's got to be a mass cultural change cycle, not just an economic cycle. Because when I got out of school in '66, there was 1 million jobs for me to get, and a lot of people had the luxury of dropping out, in the 60s, 70s, because they knew they could go right back in.
That is the first story I tell. When I got finished writing this book and I had to do an introduction, I wrote about someone who actually died before the recession. I worked in a GI coffee house in Tacoma, Washington. During the Vietnam War, we had coffee houses where anti-war GIs came, and believe me, they were filled up, putting out newspapers, organizing unions, and they were amazing guys. And one of the people I met, I tell his life story, even though he died 2 months before, and how did I start that was related to this? Well, I mean, it was just the period you're talking about, and we were all so upbeat about, not about the war, but what would happen afterwards. That he went to work in a GM factory, and the GM factory had an actual strike about the speed of the line. We were going to make humanized work. And the main thing is that when I met him again, when I first met him, he left that GM job with his wife. He just stayed till they had the baby, and because they used the health plan. And you could quit a job,
right,
hitchhike someplace else because you liked a band in that city, and always get a rent-covering job. Whether you were a teacher, you could get a teacher's job. If you were just unskilled, you could walk into a little shop if you didn't like a big factory.
It's true. There was always a job around, and now
instead of talking about humanizing work, we talk about getting work.
I saw an article in the paper the other day that said all this stuff about how it's basically almost it's not dishonest, but it seems dishonest. They report all the time that jobs increase and jobs increase. Yeah, jobs increase. Low level, low wage jobs that are going nowhere. There's more of them because that's good for the corporate heads.
But also, as there's less unemployment in the sense of people out looking for jobs, but more people than ever just out of the labor force.
Well, I mean,
that's that's not a very.
Give me some other. Since we're talking about the book here, we might as well refer to things in the book. I mean, give me some other examples of people, because basically you just went out there and talked to different people,
right. And they were. I was embarrassed because I thought I would be talking to people in much worse shape, but a very simplest thing. Someone called me and said she was so worried about her stepchild. Not like this is an evil stepmother, but he had so many debts and how do they live like this? And they're two teachers. And I actually talked to these people, and they did everything they were supposed to. A lovely young couple, and they invested in themselves. They borrowed for education, went straight through school, not playing around and dropping out the way I did. They couldn't afford that. They went straight through school and got their MAs in 5 years and borrowed rather modestly and started paying it back. And they would have student debts are just egregious. You can't even refinance them. They're paying 8.5%, hardly paying it off, paying $400 a month. Then they get offered nice jobs in another city. They go to sell their house, which is also what they were supposed to do. They bought a relatively inexpensive, what do they call it, a starter house. Well, we in New York, of course, don't have to buy houses. We just rent.
Yeah, and if we can afford to rent.
They bought
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I don't want to tell you about my rent-controlled apartment, but
no, don't do that.
Okay, when you read about it in the book, because at a certain point
I know.
But anyway, they bought this starter house, but when they went to sell it, in the meantime, the crash had happened around them, and if they could sell it, they would still own the bank $200,000.
Yeah.
So they're trying to figure: can they move? Do they move? They move to the new jobs. They're paying $3,000 a month on that house. They're paying $400 a month on their student loan. And someone that I sent it to said to me, "I'm so glad you sent this to me." This is one case where I did do something favorable. The woman said, "I have tried to keep my mouth shut, but I've been looking at my kids and I'm thinking, wow, they are really self-intelligent. They don't know how to live. What are they doing? Because I never heard of debts and borrowing to pay the credit card."
Right.
And she said, "I looked at your book and I saw that these were a nice young couple who had one child, couldn't afford to have another child till they sold the underwater house. And I see that the numbers just don't add up. They didn't do anything wrong." And she said, "I understood that the deck was stacked. And the next time I saw my kids, I said that because they had felt, even though I never said it, they had to feel that I was sort of critical of them. And now I understood that just everything has changed. It's not like, oh, I saved and blah, 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 and what's wrong with you?"
Well, one of the people you interviewed in the book is actually familiar to a lot of people at Sirius because he...
Richard Bay.
Yeah, Richard Bay is somebody who, he and I, have spoken to each other down here. I mean, he's worked at doing fill-ins for other people.
His name, by the way. The other names weren't real.
Right, but Richard Bay's name is Richard Bay. And what happened with him is an example of what happened to some people in this society, too.
But I must say, his was an unusual case. He had all of his savings from everything, from selling a condo at a profit and everything, with an old school friend. And that happened that they were all school friends that went to the same school as Bernie Madoff. This guy wasn't a Bernie Madoff, except that he, in fact, Richard likes to say that he got into it by accident. It wasn't a Ponzi scheme. He just had some bad luck. Richard lost every penny of his life savings. And
he had a good amount of money.
Oh, yes. And what was so interesting about talking to him, now that is not a standard thing. Investors made a lot of their money back quickly.
But a lot of people who...
But what was unusual about talking to Richard, it was like a reverse thing. For the first time in his life, he had to start thinking about, well, wait a minute, can I afford to go to this restaurant? What's the cheapest I can go away eating here? He's borrowing money from friends. He's trying to figure it out.
Which is what most people in this country wind up doing.
All the time. Yeah. And so Richard's reaction to doing that, to how it brought him down, to have to think about that, was really an insight into how other people live, borrowing from this one to pay that one. And
because he's been in sort of a high-paid show business job since the 70s and 80s. So.
Right. He told me he made $1 million one year.
Yeah, so now he's seeing how, I mean, remember that Jacob Riis, the title of that famous Jacob Riis book, How the Other Half Lives. Now it's how the other sort of 80% lives in this country.
That's really what I used Richard for, not to say, oh, you can lose all your money overnight, because it didn't happen to many people, although it was over a construction-related.
But you do mention in the book the fact that there are actually millions of Americans who are approaching retirement or right on the cusp of it or something, who were looking forward to not having to work as much or at all, or looking forward to having a certain amount of money to live off of, and all of a sudden, bang,
Right. Most of them, the bang happens because most people have their savings in their homes. So it's their home that they can't now sell for a profit and move to a smaller home. And also it's their children's inheritance. So that the next generation, that many more houses will be owned by the bank, and that fewer houses will be owned by...
Well, let me ask you this question. When I have economists on here all the time, and then people call up who identify themselves as right...
Can we have people call up? That would be great.
We could do that, too. We have people, but people call up all the time here, and they say, they identify themselves as right-wingers or conservatives or whatever. And they say, but what about the responsibility of people? Nobody put a gun to anybody's head over the last 5 years and said, buy this, buy that,
I don't write that kind of thing. I mean, this woman was very foolish to make that loan. I write about people in California, ordinary people who got so involved in the, they were living off, their houses became investments instead of homes. And I think one of my favorite characters in the book is the lady who was a mortgage saleswoman before. And her daughter kept telling her, this is going to crash, and she kept saying, oh, that's all right, I have a 5-year plan. You take the money out of your house and you buy 2 other houses, and it doubles in 5 years, and then you sell it, and then you stop. Only it stopped before her. And this woman, she had a sense of honor. I was aghast at the way she was operating, but as soon as she realized that housing prices weren't going to go up, she was doing this in Nevada and California, she called up her clients. She was Filipino, and it was all Filipino doctors and nurses, and she called everybody up and said, stop paying. And people said, well, that'll ruin my credit. And she said, no, walk away. It's more important to have the money than the credit. Save your cash, not your credit. That became her slogan. And her sense of honor was to try to, and it was I found California so weird because I'd never been any place where ordinary people were betting about their houses.
Well, I mean, this kind of thing has happened before in this country. Like if you look at the Great Depression, in 1929, one of the things that led up to it, just one thing, right, was that there's no restrictions on banks or whatever. But the other thing that led up to it was that the average person, even people who were like shoe clerks or whatever these, all you do is you put 10% down, and the rest is in la-la land. You didn't have to actually spend real money to be a big investor in the stock market. I mean, so what I'm asking is sort of on a general basis is how much responsibility does the American public have for their own situation here?
I don't care. I don't have good guys and bad guys in my book.
Okay.
I have guys. I have bankers that were pressured to do this and couldn't do anything else, and they really, well, of course, bad bankers don't talk to me. I mean, they don't have time. They're busy.
They don't have to talk to anyone.
And in fact, I have a funny story about looking for. After all, I live right a few blocks from Wall Street, so I figured after Lehman Brothers crashed, there's a lot of people selling mortgage-based derivatives that must be unemployed. So I started looking for them just the way I look for other people, by going around saying, "Do you know anybody who? Do you know anybody who?" Couldn't find them. I thought, well, okay, that method doesn't work. Then I called a lawyer who represented Lehman Brothers people, and he told me everybody, he's trying to get their back pay.
Right.
And he told me, no, you won't find such a person. Everybody who was doing that derivative business has been picked up by the other banks. It is a little different than the recession you spoke about, for the reason that I'm trying to write about, which is it wasn't just speculation. The housing boom was certainly speculative. And everyone in places like California and Nevada were in on it. But the reason for making that kind of loan, which clearly people couldn't pay back, was the diminishing incomes, and that is new in America.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
How that's going to work its way out.
Well, I mean, they've also got you coming and going in like 10 different directions. I mean, then laws get passed, get pushed through by people who are in various political parties who work for corporations, more or less directly. They pass laws against declaring bankruptcy.
The student loan thing.
Right.
Do you know how or rather, the argument they used when they started those student loans, that you cannot rid yourself of in bankruptcy, and you can't refinance the 8.5% interest that many of them are at? You know what they said when they started that? That started in the 70s, early 70s, and they were first created as normal loans. Now, remember, the government backs these loans 100%.
Right.
You can't lose if you're the bank. You collect as much as you can, and then the bank pays you 100% too. And so, but the question came up about this business about you can't get rid of them in bankruptcy. And you know what they pointed to, these bankers? They said, listen to those students. Listen to what they're talking about. And they were talking about me and the free speech movement, I guess, and what we were like in the 60s. They said, these people are all anarchists. They have no intention of paying us back. Well, if so, why'd you make the loans? But that was their argument.
Because they're guaranteed to be made whole by the government using our tax money. That's why. They can't lose.
They can't lose, and they're still getting 8.5%. I'm going to write separately about student loans here.
Yeah, no, that's something really.
And by the way, it's the one small thing that Obama has made better.
Yeah, well, one small thing is about it. I mean, I if anybody who is paying attention was shocked the other day when he got up and said he intends to, do some fancy cutting of Social Security.
It's so strange. He bargains against himself. When he's a senator, he says we should raise the minimum wage to $9.50. And since no one is bargaining, he says, well, I'll concede $9. But nobody's on the other side saying, oh, no, we say $8.50. They're saying, no raise, no raise, no raise.
Yeah, well, he's amazing. He will concede everything every time, as if somebody on the other side is holding a gun to his head.
Somebody on the side is even bargaining.
Well, it's very difficult to understand a person like this. Sometimes you have to...
I don't understand it truly, and I shouldn't try. I don't know.
Well, you know what? Sometimes I wander into psychology.
Too bad we didn't build a third party in the 60s.
Well, it is too bad, but now there's a third party now. But I mean, I get the same. Every time I talk about it, I get like piled on by regular Democrats. You're going to let the other guys win, and they're evil. Oh, really? You mean they might kill people with drone strikes? They might submarine Social Security. They might play golf with bankers in Florida.
Actually, Obama was the first major party candidate I ever voted for, and I think
the first time. Did you vote for him again this time?
No, but I think it was racial. I really said to myself,
yeah, sure.
I really said to myself, the first black candidate should get a big vote.
Yeah, you got to vote for him, right? I mean, this is a historic thing. But then look who he turns out to be, the hood ornament on the Rolls Royce of capitalism.
It's just that he really doesn't know anything about economics.
And he's not. I don't think he's very good at bargaining. He's not good at his job.
It's strange that I should have to be talking Keynesianism. I mean, Paul Krugman has said, "Look, I'm a middle of the roader." I didn't know I'd have to argue these questions.
Well,
it is very strange, and I don't know what to make.
But let me. I have to take a commercial break. This is a commercial radio station. So
great!
Going to go sell hair oil or whatever it is, or gold, and then we'll be back in 3 minutes, and let's see if we can round up some calls. Number here 866-997-4748. I know you're out there, so let's get some calls here. 866-997-4748, and the book is Down the Up Escalator, How the 99% Live in the Great Recession by Barbara Garson. And when we come back, calls or no calls, I want to have a discussion with you since it's the way it is, let's talk about maybe ways outside the two parties that anything could possibly be done. And coming from the 60s like I do, maybe we have suggestions. So we're going to take a break and come back. Okay, we're back with Barbara Garson, and the book is Down the Up Escalator, How the 99% Live in the Great Recession. And the title refers to one particular, a father and a son that you talked to, right? Basically, you said somebody was sort of born on the down escalator, right?
Oh, yes, that's true. It happened through the radio. We bought a car, cash for clunkers.
Uh-huh.
And a salesman called to try to get us to keep the radio service that was part of the car, that came with the car.
Mm-hmm.
And my husband talked to him, and he said, this guy is so clever. I don't believe he was always selling radios in a big sales basement, a phone center. And he got to talking to him, and he was in Indiana. And we actually went out to visit him.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked to him and his father. Well, his life story was, he really was a very clever kid, and he had a good group of sort of fun friends. And the only choices for them was that kind of job, or, they could go to McDonald's. And with the recession, they couldn't even walk into McDonald's. They had Anyway, and I talked to his father, who was religious, conservative. He had My Life as a Conservative out there. What's his name? The Bush's Brain. I mean, that's what he read, and he was a very religious man. But it turned out that his situation had been going down and down and down. He worked for a company which I call Big Box, because he still works for them.
Right.
I like to mention the names of companies. And he was a manager. He had about 400 people in his section. And his hours were up to 10 hours a day, and sometimes 12.
And he's getting the same pay, right?
Right. He didn't get extra pay for that because he's not hourly. They are constantly trying to get rid of him because he's older, and they made it clear. They've sort of been threatened. We will find a way to take your pension away if you don't just quit, because they want to bring in someone at a lower price.
Mm-hmm.
And he's toughing it out. He's a very religious man, and his son has seen that. He's seen it, and he's seen his mother also, a company that was bought by another company, and she was kept on, but she's doing much more for the same money.
Which is the same all over the country.
Right, and that's why there's no spending money around. I mean, things are still being produced and very efficiently, but people aren't paid enough to buy what they produce. And he's seen all this, and he has such an interesting mixed reaction to it. I mean, he feels like his father was kind of a fool to keep working this hard, but he doesn't quite understand that there was a time when the bargain you made for security, you'd say, well, but for the security, I'll stay with this big company.
Right. That's the price you paid.
At least you got the security.
Right.
Now his father is pushed every which way, and the whole family is sort of struggling. And that's where I did come up with the phrase, the kid basically feels like, I'm not going to struggle up.
Yeah, why spend my whole life to wind up in a position like this?
Right, because there's not much I can do anyway. So it's in a way I was visiting modern hippies. It was very interesting to see.
No, we had a caller, but our caller is he's too fascinated by what you were saying, so he hung up. But
I'm so sorry, I shouldn't do that.
That's all right. Don't worry about it. So here's a question, then, which I have to end. Again, every time I get a guest on here, and we expose what's going on here, which is generally pretty crummy. I got to ask, right? What do you see as possibilities, or what can people do about this? I mean,
well, in the simplest way, what they should do, but we have to do it for them. What those who want to preserve American capitalism have to do is raise wages. People have got to get the money in their hand to buy what they produce. Mm-hmm. Raise minimum wages, raise higher wages. I mean, it's your patriotic duty. Go for that raise. I mean, organize to get more wages. This is sort of what they have to do. If we had our way, we might think about it a different way. Go back to where we were in the 60s when we were saying, well, wait a minute, maybe we don't have to produce quite as much. What the people at the Lordstown Assembly Plant that I was at, maybe we can sort of have more control over this industry so that
a sort of a less competitive, less aggressive, and more communal way of looking at things, right? Yeah.
Because we can't keep producing in the old way. Mm-hmm. I guess their way out right now is cleaning up the mess. It costs money to clean up a mess, so cleaning up the planet might be a good.
Ultimately, what's happening, if you look at the whole structure, ultimately, probably what will happen is that if they're producing all this junk and nobody's buying it, what they'll do is just figure out some way for Congress to pass a law, and the president will certainly sign it, being a corporate hireling that he is. They'll take automatic deductions out of your check, and to pay for the unsold products.
Well, okay, but your check has to be big enough.
So, in other words, it's good for them to raise wages as well as it is for us.
Right. Look, starting in the 1970s, there was a big reversal of what really was a land of opportunity,
right? Correct.
Economically, and starting from 1971 to 2007, wages increased 4%, for average, and some people a lot and some people very little. But I'm not talking 4% a year. I'm talking 4% over that 36 years that I'm talking about.
That's terrible.
And in that period, productivity increased by 99%. And there was almost 100%. So productivity, the average worker's productivity went out about 25 times more than his wage. So how can you run a country where we sell 70% of what we produce to each other when people can't buy?
Well, it's got to, ultimately, if it keeps going on like this, it has to crash in a way because people cannot afford to buy all this stuff or pay for all these things.
You know what's so sad or so strange, We are sometimes accused of being unpatriotic or anti-American. We predict the demise of American capitalism, or we predict the demise of the empire. But right now, it's the big capitalists that are doing that. Mm-hmm. They're saying, well, really, this may be an untenable situation. Buffett just dumped a huge amount of shares in things that had to do with American consumer products companies. And they're kind of talking all about what they're selling abroad, what they're producing abroad. Mm-hmm. And it's like they, not us, are the ones saying, well, they're hedging their bets. Mm-hmm. It's kind of leveling off in this country, isn't it?
Well, you know what?
We're stuck with it.
Well, it's when I was a kid, I used to play marbles when I was a kid, in the 50s, playing marbles. And I got to be so good at it. It's not boasting or anything. I just got to be so good at it that I won all the marbles within a 3-block area, right?
Right, so there was no more marble games.
So I couldn't play marbles anymore. So what happened was some of the kids' mothers, like my friend Stewie and some other people, they called up my mother and said, you know what, you got to get Mike to give the marbles back to everybody. Because I couldn't play marbles anymore. Maybe we have to convince Bloomberg and the Koch brothers and everybody else, you know what? If you want to play marbles, you're going to have to share some with the other kids.
Exactly. Oh, that is so perfect.
Okay. There's the next book title for you. Share the Marbles.
I may even use it now.
Okay, feel free. It's all communal property. All right, Barbara Garson, and the book is Down the Up Escalator: How the 99% Live in the Great Recession. I won't ask you if you have a website to go to.
Well, I can't stand. I've never.
That's why I didn't ask you, but you might have something.
I do. I have one.
All right, good.
I'm about to put on just the people that you meet in the book.
I only have about we've only got about 30 seconds.
It's called downtheupescalator.com.
All right, downtheupescalator.com. In the modern world, downtheupescalator.com. All right, great.
Buy the book, it's much more interesting.
Yeah, buy the book. It's a real book, and you could really buy it. Is it an e-book, too?
It's an e-book, too. And you know something? It just came out, and it's already got used copies of people that you send review copies to sell it to the Strands, and now it's...
That's what happens. All right, I got to go.
My publisher. Bye-bye.
Yeah, listen, thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much.
All right. Down the Up Escalator, How the 99% Live in the Great Recession. It's a good book because she interviews actual people across the board, all the way across the country, and gives you a sense of what's going on, as if you don't know. And see, she's worried about this. Like, what good does it do? Because she cares, right? She wants to write this book, but you have to hope that doing things like this do help people. And you read this book and you say, I'm not the only one, which is sometimes the best you can do. All right, that's it for this hour. We're going to come back after 6 o'clock, talk to an expert on Social Security to discuss how this person, if in fact he is actually a person, Mr. Obama, could go back on so many promises. Okay, we're back. Mike Fader on Sirius XM Left 127. And our guest this hour is somebody who's been on before. We're going to talk about Social Security. And one of the main reasons is because of this recent announcement by, I guess that man is the president, although I don't want to believe it. Mr. Barack Obama came out the other day, and apparently he's going to propose a budget in which he is going to tell people that he is perfectly willing to and planning to, along with Congress if they agree, to essentially cut Social Security benefits for people, for millions of people. And I don't know if at this point anybody is actually shocked by that. If you're shocked by that, then you need maybe to wake up or stop watching TV or something, because this guy keeps doing this all the time. If anybody has ever broken more promises as a president, I don't really know who it is. Anyhow, Mr. Kingston, Eric Kingston, is here with us, who's the co-director of the Strengthen Social Security campaign. Hi.
Hi, good to be here, Mike. Thank you.
Let me, you mind if I do a little bio stuff on you here so people know who they're listening to?
Sure.
Okay. Mr. Kingston is a professor of social work at Syracuse University School of Social Work, also a senior research associate in the Maxwell School Center for Policy Research. He did serve as a policy advisor to two presidential commissions, 82-83 National Commission on Social Security Reform and the 1994 Bipartisan Commission on Entitlement and Tax Reform. Author of Ties That Bind, The Interdependence of Generations, and Social Security and Medicare, a policy primer, the diversity of the baby boom, and also authored Lessons from Joan, Living and Loving with Cancer, a Husband's Story, and has many other credits. But here we are to talk about the president's proposal. Did that come, by the way, as a shock to you?
Not as a shock, unfortunately. We had heard that the president was planning to put this in the budget. We were still very saddened and angered and frustrated with the willingness to give away a piece of Social Security in the way he's doing it, or in any way.
No, I don't know if anybody has an advanced copy of this, but the thing that's been floating around for quite some time now, and that people have been writing about it, even some people who you might find surprising writing about this in a favorable way, people who you might consider liberal economists, I think even Mr. Krugman did this, is apparently they've come up, I don't know who came up with this, and maybe you know, they came up with this formula called change CPI, and maybe you could explain what that is.
Sure. Let's back up.
Okay, sure.
Let's remember the reason we have a Social Security program. We put it in place to provide broad protection against certain things that happen in life. You can die and leave young children. You can become disabled and have a family you're supporting that you're unable to support. You can reach old age, as many of us will, we hope, and you need basic protection. The system was built and put into place over 77 years at this point, with contributions by every American who's working, contributions that have been paid, the system's been paid for in full by the American people, and it's done an awfully good job. You know, you go back to this last recession, or this recession that we're in, we've seen our pension systems going south. We've seen housing equity go south. We've seen wages go south, and some of us have lost homes, some of us have lost jobs. The one system that still works in retirement is Social Security. It's critical. Like all systems, you need to maintain it, just like the Constitution of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
It's an institution, you make adjustments. But it is there, it's fundamental, and it gives expression to the American people's desire to have protection, but also to provide broad protection to their parents, to their children, to themselves. So that's what we've got. And we've got a very modest retirement income system, retirement system in Social Security. It's not a Cadillac of a benefit. And everyone out there who receives it knows that.
I do, and I do.
Yeah, so. It's not a Cadillac. It's a very important source of income. For households with about $34,000 or less, it provides in total, on average, about 75% of the income to those homes, and that's 60% of older households.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got the system. We have the core purpose is to provide broad protection to the American people. The cost of living adjustment is designed to provide that protection and to assure once you receive your benefit, it maintains its purchasing power no matter how long you live or how much inflation we have. It's a core part of the system. Here's what's happened. To answer your question, Mike, about...
Can I ask you a question real quick before we go to that? The cost of living allowance, is it? COLA?
Yeah.
When was that with the original bill, or did that come in later? And how is it arrived at?
That was signed into law by Richard Nixon.
Okay.
I mean, there's an irony here. I'm sad to say, like Richard Nixon, who opened up China against the will of the Republican Party,
mm-hmm.
A conservative Republican who opened up relations with China, Barack Obama is risking opening up and collapsing, ultimately greatly reducing and moving us away from a very successful Social Security program that the American people deeply value.
So he'd be almost like the moral equivalent, on the immoral equivalent on the other side.
Well, I won't call him moral. I mean, it's hard to. I'm not going to say morally. I'm not going to make the analogy morally to Richard Nixon, but I'll make the analogy politically.
Mm-hmm.
He is doing this, and he is risking. He's risking the future of this system. And what he's done, the chain CPI.
Okay.
First of all, spell it C-U-T. It is a cut. There's no way around it. The White House, earlier in negotiations with Speaker Boehner, put out that it was willing to agree to cutting Social Security by using the chained CPI. Here's the deal. The cost of living, the CPI, the Consumer Price Index that's used to measure Social Security, is a market basket. And that market basket is collected each month, and they try to figure out how the cost of that basket changes month to month. Now,
we're talking about basics, right? Staples, rent, mortgage, food.
Yeah, and if you ask seniors today, and I've done this, you go out and you give talks and you ask people and you say, do you think the 1.7% cost of living adjustment that you received last year really represents inflation? They just laugh. They utterly laugh. The problem is the White House thinks they got too much. And when they got zero, the White House is thinking they got too much. The current cost of living adjustment does not take into account adequately the high health care costs of older households and people with disabilities and the high housing costs.
Well, also food keeps going through the roof all the time.
And there is good argument to be made, and there are members of the Senate and the House who are beginning to make it, that we understate inflation with the measure we use in Social Security. But along come the fancy economists and the ideologues who want to create an argument for cutting Social Security. They say, this chain, the existing COLA overstates inflation. The existing CPI overstates inflation because it doesn't take into account that when the price of one good goes up, say yachts, people substitute another good, maybe a Lamborghini. It doesn't take into account substitution across categories.
So wait a minute. So if you're coming from the CPI, club here, and you're an economist who says that they believe in it or whatever, or a president, you say that the inflation is not correctly estimated. For instance, if people are buying steak and it starts costing too much, they'll fall back to chicken. But in this case, if people are buying chicken or maybe even cheaper cuts of chicken, what is there to fall back on?
Well, whatever they fall back on. So there's less, and particularly if people are buying generic pharmaceuticals, you can't give that up. You don't. The substitution across categories is a red herring for the old and for the disabled. It is. So the short story here is, if you put that into effect, you cut annual cost of living adjustments by about 0.3% on average.
So, in other words, these people who don't live on Social Security, obviously, and wouldn't recognize a Social Security check if they fell over it, they come and they say, "This is how we can cut it," because they discover, like Columbus discovered America, a glaring miscalculation in the formulation.
That's
People aren't going to keep going and buying the same things all the time. They'll step down from whatever they were buying. And
they're saying they won't be any worse off. Now, you could make the case, and I would make the case, they really are worse off. If they can't buy steak and they buy chicken, they are worse off.
Well, they've already been buying chicken. This will have to go to cat food now.
Okay. So, but you can make that case. But here, let me take it a step further. We have 250 economists and another 50 experts who signed a letter saying there is no basis for assuming that the cost of living adjustment is more accurate. The chain CPI is more accurate than the current measure of inflation. In fact, if anything, it's probably less so.
I'm sure.
We have, and that included a Secretary of Labor, Ray Marshall, and many other eminent economists. The White House and others, I think the American people now understand this has nothing to do with accuracy. This has to do with how do you cut Social Security. And what's most important, and I say chain CPI, CUT, the cut is very significant. For a typical worker, say someone who turns 65 today, or is 65 and receiving Social Security, 10 years hence they'll lose about $700 in that 10th year. Going forward to 20 years, they lose about $1,200. And you go out to age 95, you've lost about, in that year alone, you've lost about $1,700.
And this is all the while costs are going up for everything.
Right. Yeah. And all told, you would have lost about $28,000. This is what people are going out 30 years. And it'll cut the benefit of everybody who's receiving Social Security today. That's a out-and-out backing down from the promise that was made not to slash benefits.
But if Social Security is funded by it's an entity that funds itself, right? It doesn't depend on
itself. It is funded primarily through contributions of working persons.
Well, I don't understand the relationship. I don't understand how cutting Social Security relates to the budget. Maybe you could explain that to me.
Well, it doesn't. By law, Social Security cannot borrow a penny, and it never has, and so it's never contributed to the deficit or the debt. The way it relates to the budget is that those who want to pull this apart bit by bit, or who want to, in the case of the president, show that he's the adult in the room, will say, okay, I'm willing to put your Social Security on the table. He wasn't willing to put the tax cuts for people of $250,000 a year. He got up to $450 and above. He had the Bush. He wasn't willing to put the expiration of the Bush tax cuts, or cut, basically hold firm on not restoring the Bush tax cuts for the top 1%. But somehow he's willing to cut everybody, and it's not he sees putting this proposal forward and as a necessary evil, and he's advocating cutting the benefits of every single person on Social Security. And I'll go one step further. What I think is worse is he's talking about cutting the benefit. This will cut the benefits of everyone who will be on it in the future.
Now, who else does this affect too? This affects not just old people who receive Social Security. Who else is this going to affect?
Well, it affects anyone who's ever going to work in the future, because it will cut benefits for everyone who is in middle age today when they reach old age or they're disabled, or it will cut benefits for our children, people, young workers, and for our children's children. It's a clear benefit cut, and it's a cut for everyone. It breaks the promise the president made that he would not slash benefits on the American people.
Does it affect Social Security disability? Does it affect veterans?
Yes, it affects veterans, Social Security disability. It affects low-income programs. Basically, the Social Security part, you get $127,000 in savings. $127 billion over 10 years in savings. That's out of the pocket of Social Security beneficiaries. It also pulls out direct savings out of veterans' benefits, out of many different groups, and it also brings in some money by raising taxes on the middle class, effectively, because our income tax brackets are indexed to the inflation measures that we're talking about. So they would go up slower, which means more people would be paying at a higher rate, but mainly middle class. It doesn't really put the burden on high-income people.
All of this happening at a time when income inequality is greater than it's ever been since maybe the Gilded Age, or maybe ever in the United States, where there are people, there's maybe 10 people who could afford to pay for the housing of the whole rest of the country who's homeless for a whole year in their incomes. You've got. I mean, one other question is, what about the whole concept of the cap on Social Security? Like the 113,000?
Well, it's yes, 113.7.
And if that was lifted to 250 or 500.
Well, if that was lifted, if that was gradually eliminated, it would address. We have a Social Security system which has sufficient resources to meet all of its obligations till the early 2030s, 2033 right now.
Yeah.
After that, we're 25 cents short on the dollar that Americans have earned.
Well, that's a huge amount of money. Yeah.
It's a problem. It's not. It's actually relatively modest. It's real money. It's significant. It could be addressed by many things other than cutting benefits. It could be addressed by eliminating the cap and asking millionaires and billionaires eventually to pay the same rate as their secretaries and their line workers are paying.
But then you would be asking them to be responsible for other human beings.
Yes, and that's one thing. It could be addressed by having a financial transaction tax on stock market speculation and devoting that to Social Security. There are many ways to do it. What's out of whack here is, outside of Washington and outside of the kind of elites that are really pushing this, the Peter Peterson Foundation and many of the groups who've been pushing austerity as the solution to this country's problems.
Yeah.
Outside of that, outside of Washington, Americans universally, and it doesn't matter, they can be Tea Party or union households, they can be Democrats or Republicans or anything else, they're real clear. They understand they need this core protection, and they don't want to see this system cut. In fact, they're willing to even pay. There's recent research saying they're really willing to pay a little bit more money to not only address the financing of the system, but also improve benefits. And Washington,
because they are far too low.
They are far too low. The average benefit's about a little less than, for a retiree, is a little less than $15,000.
Imagine if you had to live on just that.
Well, imagine that, in fact, many older people and many people with disabilities do live on that or just a few dollars more. For 50% of Social Security beneficiaries, they get at least two-thirds of all their benefits from Social Security. This is not a system that puts people high on the hog. This is a core protection. It's a form of insurance. This is not a welfare program. This is something we pay into to insure ourselves when certain things happen, just like fire insurance. And when they happen, this system has always paid on time. The sad thing the president has done, and there are certainly many Republicans who want to do this, and the president's responding to what he perceives as the Republicans' wishes to cut Social Security.
I don't even know why he responds to anything that they wish.
No, I mean, well, the perception is that he will, they will be.
He'll look better than them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whatever it is,
But he's the man. I'm sorry, it makes me so enraged. I mean, the man is playing what he considers to be brilliant political chess with a bunch of other people in his town, while the rest of the whole country goes begging. This is what's so outrageous about it,
Well, I'll say it this way: I'm very disappointed in our president. I worked for his election in 2000, beginning before Iowa, and I voted for him both times. I voted for him this time too.
Did you really?
He's our president, not the alternative. However, I am so disappointed because he has taken this issue and some others and run with them in ways that are so destructive. Only a Democrat could start taking steps that pull apart Social Security bit by bit. And he seems to be doing that without really appreciating the importance of this institution to the well-being of the American people.
Well, you may even be charitable here. I mean, what if he does understand what it means? And
if he does, then he's just simply a tool of financial interests.
Well, that's my point of view.
I can't speak to his motivation.
No.
I have my own gut, but I can speak to the problem of campaign contributions that, look, when you have a Congress that the day they're elected, they have to start going begging high-income people and corporations for money for the next election, of course it's going to be distorted in what it does.
Well, just the other day, the president was out addressing various issues that have to do with the budget and Republicans, and where he did it was he was addressing actually Social Security, and where he was making this speech was in the home of a billionaire where he was raising money for the Democratic Party. Yeah, this is the way it is.
So, I mean, and I think there's an out of touch. This cut in the cost of living adjustment is what people in Washington who favor it call just a little tweak. Well, you're 65 years old and you're getting your benefits, say today, and you turn 75. You have very modest income. Is $700 in your 75th year a tweak? No. Is a cumulative, if you live to 95, $28,000 a little tweak? No. That's the difference between some good meals, some gifts to grandchildren maybe, plus some good meals.
Or maybe some meals at all.
Or some meals at all. It's hugely important. And the same thing with the folks who talk about raising retirement age. Same story. It's a cut, C-U-T. But you get talking heads, Ed Rendell. You get former Governor Spitzer, my former governor, talking on CNN saying everybody in America, everyone knows you have to raise retirement age. Well, fiddlesticks, to use
fiddlesticks.
Polite term.
Are you really willing to go with that?
I will go with that. I don't have to.
I'm shocked that you would speak there.
I don't have to worry about my ratings. Okay. So
fiddlesticks.
Anyway, you get former Eliot Spitzer, who was born a millionaire and who has emerged after a difficult political experience as a talking head, sitting and telling Americans all over the country, everyone knows you have to work longer. Well, there are people out there who've lost their jobs who are in their 60s who still want to work, or there are people who are working there on lower wages than they had worked, and they have kids in their 40s who they're seeing do not have the kind of security they had dreamed for them. And you're telling them we've got to cut their kids' Social Security benefits because it's only natural. It's a disconnect.
Well, all of this too, from proposed by a man who is a multimillionaire to a group of people, a couple of miles away in Washington, or a mile away, whatever it is, the capital is, 2/3 of whom are millionaires. The basic starting pay for a congressperson is $172,000. That does not include the free lunches, the trips, the campaign donations, which sort of find their way into their own accounts. The president makes $400,000 a year. He's got a free house. He has got a chef. He's got everything. They can tweak all they want. How did they get to be, and here's a question maybe not in your field, but you could venture an answer if you want, how did these people get to be so far away and so disconnected from the mass of American people who need this money to live on?
Well, I'm going to say the following. First, not all of them are, but I think those who are, to a large extent, exist in a bubble. We're going through a period of social, and some just plain believe that they are the captains of industry. They produce the wealth. They are the ones that the 47% that Mr. Romney referred to suck off of. The folks who supposedly are, the 47% who were not deserving, even though they'd worked their whole lives, paid into Social Security, they went to war for our nation, came back injured, received veterans benefits. Anyway, there's a disrespect and a disconnect, and I think it's a kind of moral blinder. For some, I think it's a blinder, they don't see it. For others, they don't give a damn, or they have a frame where they say, in every society, there are those who produce and there are those who take. There are those who are well off and there are some poor, and you really shouldn't do anything about it. And they justify it. So I think we're living in a difficult time. At the same time, there is decency out there, and we have to harness that. And I say that about Social Security. This system, besides being something we've worked for, built, and we're going to maintain, it's something that gives expression to fundamental decency in our society. The idea that you work hard and you get protection for yourself and your family. The idea that you have an obligation to your parents, to others, to your neighbors. Basic kinds of religious ethics, depending on whether you draw your ethics from religion or some other core values in the American experience. The idea that dignity really is important and we're going to underwrite it. Government lets us do some things we cannot do by ourselves. This system was built by the American people. The government is a vehicle. It's critically important that it not be played with and it not be talked about blithely by politicians in Washington.
But the fact that they can propose this, the fact that they do talk about it blithely, forget about who they are, that they're millionaires, the fact that they could actually have this discussion and propose it publicly, doesn't that show a kind of a major shift in the core values of America, that they can actually say these things in the first place, that they can seriously consider it, and they may very well pass this? Doesn't that mean that the whole core value of Americans has shifted downward somehow?
Well, I think the conservative echo chamber and then the kind of just the echoes followed by the media, the smart people know you can't maintain Social Security and Medicare. Well, take a look at the tax benefits we've maintained for the very richest. Take a look at the benefits for people who manage hedge funds. We can do what we want. We just have to imagine it. Now, I'm going to just...
But here, let me before you go on, let me just follow up a little bit. By the way, if you just tuned in, you're listening to Eric Kingson. That's Kingson, co-director of the Strengthen Social Security campaign. Is that strengthensocialsecurity.org, perhaps?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so that's where people should go. Go there. Strengthensocialsecurity.org, all the information and ways to do something about it. I just want to follow up on that question because you're telling me, and I understand this, you're telling me the fact of the rich people this and taxes that. What I'm saying is it seems as if to me that unless there is absolutely no control by the people of the United States over their government, as if it's shifted and drifted to another island, like it's an offshore government, that they may actually be reflecting the shifted values of American culture. You may be taking for granted something that doesn't exist anymore. Maybe people don't care about other people's dignity, and they don't care what happens to other people.
Well,
or maybe you don't want to think that.
Well, no, I don't want to think that we're giving up our democracy. I don't think democracy is perfect. I think it's our responsibility to make it more perfect. Anyone who's listening to you now on the radio who's concerned about seeing their or other people's Social Security benefits cut should be on the phone on Monday to their member of Congress, their senator, to the White House saying, do not cut the cost of living adjustment. I don't buy this for a second. We have a retirement income crisis in this country, and this is only going to make it worse.
But these people already know that. What good will these calls do? They know that. The president knows it.
Well, I think that members of Congress, in fact, are very... I'm not saying we have perfect democracy, but I guarantee you the one thing members of Congress listen to very strongly is when they get calls from their constituents. When calls come in, when letters come in, they're listening because they have to go back and be reelected. In the case of the House, every 2 years. I think it's the voice of the American people who are, in fact, on the side of maintaining this strong system and on the side of maintaining these protections. The strength we have as those of us who are in this coalition that I co-chair, 300-plus organizations representing the major unions, major women's groups, some of the major aging and disability groups, and civil rights and other groups. The strength we have is that outside of the bounds of Washington and some of the elites, when you talk with the American people, they understand. They do not want to see this cut. And it doesn't matter whether they're Republicans.
And they voted for a man who said, or made it very clear, even you wrote about this and about his inaugural speech. I have a piece here that you wrote in January. I'm glad the president appreciates the fact that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. They voted for this man because he is supposed to be a Democrat. He is supposed to, and his party is supposed to understand the very things you're saying shouldn't be tampered with or even spoken about, and yet here he is doing it. And yet you're encouraging people to go straight to the same people to urge them not to do this.
Well, here's the reason why. Because
I'm sorry, I get very exercised about this.
No, I get very exercised over what's happening, and we can disagree, but those same people are going to be sensitive to calls from their constituents. A lot of them are not pleased. Look, we have 107 members of the Democratic caucus in the House of Representatives who signed a letter to the president saying, do not cut Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid, strongly signing that. We have a resolution that went through the Senate a few weeks ago that no senator voted against, that they would not, because they didn't want to be on record, that the Senate voted not to cut Social Security by changing the cost of living adjustment.
But you know that the House majority of Republicans will go along with this needless negotiation of the president's.
Yes, the House majority will, and possibly some Democrats will.
Yeah.
Speaker Pelosi, my leader Pelosi, who I have a lot of respect for, but she's given signals that she could accept the chain CPI.
Yeah, her husband has $70 million. She could accept it.
No, they're under a lot of pressure, and we need to turn up the pressure. They're under pressure from the folks who give them the money, the campaign money, but there are people. I'm not going to paint every member of Congress, not even every Republican, to be honest. I'm a strong Democrat. Mm-hmm. There are people who are trying to do the right things. And some people who'll do the right things maybe for the wrong reasons. We need to give them the backing. There are champions in Congress who are pushing hard, like a congressman in Florida, Deutsch, like Bernie Sanders and Senator Sanders, Senator Harkin, Senator Begich from Alaska. They're standing up for these programs.
Well,
we need to give them that backing.
Okay, I understand what you're saying, and I say if people go to your website, will they be able to get information on exactly where to go and who to talk to?
And I would encourage them that they also look at the sign-ons. There are sign-ons circulating from many different groups right now. MoveOn.org has circulated one. We're circulating with them and with others petitions that are to members saying, do not cut these benefits. Do not put in a phony benefit cut called the chain CPI. Mm-hmm. So look at those things. Sign them. If you disagree with me, that's okay. We need our democratic. This is a democratic nation, and we need to retake the democracy by being engaged and not letting Wall Street.
When you say call and let people hear your voices, wouldn't the voices make more of an impression if they were done in person? What if a couple 100,000 people descended on these people?
Well, I think that would be marvelous, and I think if they keep doing this, maybe that's what will happen. Or if 5 people descend on a member's office during on a local office or the office in Washington, to have a serious talk with their representative, 5 or 50, all of that counts, and all of that is important. But to not, and I say this, I don't believe in despair. I'm an optimist. I believe that the system can respond. It doesn't always respond. It's far from perfect. It's an imperfect democracy at best. But I don't believe we as citizens should put our head in the sand, or I don't believe we as citizens should leave it up to someone else to do it. We need to get a message out that this is not tolerable. And the more the American people get their message out on Social Security, my belief is the more their representatives will start representing them properly. Some we will give backbone to. Some we will force. Some will give backbone to do the right thing they want to do, but they're a little afraid of doing. Some we will force because in the sense that they will want to have they want their constituents vote. And some who've been fighting hard as anything for a long time. Congressman Grijalva, there are many people we could say. We will give them our backing and support. And all of that matters, and I think we can win this issue.
I wanted to... I'm sorry.
One more
yeah, go ahead.
Though. Our nation is facing, and I could not agree with, Social Security is not just a retirement income program. Absolutely. It's for everyone. It's America's basic life insurance. But in terms of retirement income, we are facing a crisis. Even if working Americans today, if they continue to work till age 65, we are estimating that roughly 2/3, when you count their health care and long-term care expenses, 2/3 will not be able to maintain their retirement, their standard of living in retirement. This is a crisis. This is something the nation should be focused on. It's time to get this message out. The AFL-CIO has gotten that message out. Actually, the New York Times has taken that position recently. Tides turn slowly, or ships turn slowly. Wrong metaphor, but maybe with a little bit of push, they do turn. And we need to get our president off this message. But if we can't get the president off the message, put pressure on members of Congress. Get on the radio when you hear someone talking about this. Offer your own opinion. All of these are vehicles we can have. If there is a demonstration in your neighborhood, if there is if at some point it gets to the point where Americans take to respectful, nonviolent demonstration, join it. If that's not your style, write a letter.
Absolutely. I mean, this is what you have to do. I often mention on this show that the reason I have people like you on the show is because I tend towards the negative and a little bit towards the despairing myself, and I get angry when I read these things. So that's why I invite people like you on.
I'm furious. I'm absolutely furious. I mean, I got to tell you, this is such bad policy, and it's so wrong. We have a president who promised he would not slash benefits, and this is a slash.
And this is how he got elected, by the way.
Yeah. We have members of Congress who have promised they would not cut benefits, and if they vote for this, they break the promise. Almost all of them have said, we won't cut benefits for anyone 55 and over. Well, this is a clear cut for everyone 55 and over, and everyone under 55.
Did you? How much did you say over a period of 10 years that it would save? Was something like $160 billion?
Over 10 years, it saves $127 billion. That's out. In other words, it takes that out of the pockets of veterans who are receiving Social Security, and many do. It takes it out of the pockets of everyone who's earned these benefits.
You know what? I'm sorry. I was just doing a little computation on a pad I have in front of me here. $127 billion out of the pockets of all these people. They say they call it saving. It's basically a theft from all these other people. That's $127 billion over 10 years. If you take the fortunes, the estimated fortunes of the Koch brothers, that's two people. Michael Bloomberg, that's one person. The 5 Walton heirs, it adds up to roughly $180 billion. I just wanted to mention that figure since people throw figures around. That's 8 people whose assets are $180 billion. So the reason I mention this is because there's a larger system at work here.
No, and there is. Look, when I think our national election ran something like $8 billion or so, $9 billion, and the presidential election about $2.5 billion or so. Mm-hmm. When you have that kind of money going into your politics, you end up having politicians being very responsive to their donors, and there's something wrong. The system is broken in that it's stacked so heavily towards the very well off. We have the upper 1% are getting 22% of the income this year. It used to be that they were still very well off, but they got about 9% of all the income.
Well, if we tax that at a higher rate, we could cover this shortfall.
There's a lot we can do.
Mm-hmm. All right.
There are plenty of people who make a fair amount of money who do understand that and are concerned about it, but there are also others, many who are not.
So
basically see it as their money. I earned it. They've been bought into and been encouraged to buy into the notion of this is my money. I earn it. I deserved it. I deserve it. It doesn't matter that other people fought wars and saved this country for us. It doesn't matter that I have immigrant parents who worked hard years ago. Mm-hmm. I've made it all myself.
I have people who call up here all the time, listeners who call up, and some of them say, you know what, I've worked hard all my life, and I don't see why I should be giving my money, to other people who blah, 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 blah. And I say, how old are you? And they say, well, I'm 43, and I don't believe in all this Affordable Health Care Act. I don't believe in this. I don't believe in this nanny state. I don't believe in Social Security. And I said, well, what about when you get sick? What about if you? He says, well, I haven't ever been sick. And in other words, there are some people who don't understand mortality or age, or the tricks of fate. They live in a funny world,
Or understand that we all benefit from what goes before us. That when President Eisenhower initiated the interstate highway system, he initiated a set of investments that we all live off of. When President Roosevelt initiated, with the help of Congress, Social Security, this was done over many years and built over many years. Mm-hmm. We benefit from these. If our grandparents receive benefits, that makes our lives and a family much better.
Well, it's also better, if you look at it from an Ayn Rand point of view, is if they're getting this money, and in fact, if it was enough money to live on, then, if you want to look at it from the Ayn Rand point of view, then it wouldn't be money that they would need from us when we needed it for our kids. They would be supported. All right, I'm just going to, we'll end it there. Eric Kingson, co-director of the Strengthen Social Security campaign, and thank you very much that you're out there doing that.
Okay, and please come to our website, take a look at the materials, go to other people's websites, the Alliance for Retired Americans, the National Committee to Preserve Social Security. Look at what the AFL-CIO is doing.
Oh, speaking of which, where does AARP stand on all this?
AARP has taken a position totally opposed to the cuts through the chain CPI.
Well, that should count for something. That's a lot of votes.
It sure does. Well, and also the Veterans of Foreign Wars have taken that position, as has the American Legion and most of the veterans organizations.
Well, that covers a lot of territory.
It's a lot of territory, and there's bipartisan, strong opposition to this. We just have to make sure that our members of Congress really hear it.
All right. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. And we'll follow this up, obviously. All right. This is Sirius Left, Sirius XM Left 127. This is Mike Fader. We have some people on the line. If the people who are on the line are listening, and you could remind them too, Mr. Engineer, if you will agree to hold on for a couple of minutes while we sell real estate or toupees or whatever, we'll be back, and then we'll take your calls automatically. Okay, Steve from North Carolina, you're on.
Hi, Mike.
Hi.
Good to hear from you. Hey, this whole thing with the change CPI, to me, it's a crime because, we work all our lives to pay into this thing, and it is insurance. People seem to forget to say it's Social Security insurance. Every time you hear about it or something, they always just say Social Security like it's a give me. We pay into this.
This is our money. This is our money.
Exactly. We buy this insurance, and therefore, how can you change a contract without breaking the law?
Well, they do it every day, and now they're trying to do it again. I guess what Mr. Kingston is saying, my guess, is that we have to get on them to get them away from the trance they're in with all this money they get from rich people,
Well, they're not held accountable at all. They're not held accountable. And Mr. Obama, he should be ashamed of himself.
He's really something. What
a
sleazy son of a bitch. What a lying guy he is.
Well, it's just totally hypocritical. Now that he's made it, he's not looking back where he came from.
Oh, man.
Now, if his mom would have had her Social Security cut, like he's wanting to do these poor folks, like my mother-in-law and a lot of people that are in our families, if his mother would have been done the same, do you think he'd have had any kind of a decent life? If
Right. His grandparents who helped raise him, they had Social Security.
Yeah, I mean, how sleazy do you have to be to sell in or sell out? And they're outsourcing our government.
Well, this guy is setting the standard for broken promises. I've never seen anything like it. I mean, I've seen people run before and promise something and then turn around but he there's nobody even close to him.
Well, how can you be a president and say you're you believe in God and all this stuff, but when you're going to take from the least of these, and when he's interviewed in these interviews, nobody asked the right questions that maybe can touch.
Because they don't want to lose their jobs. They're making $500,000 a year as a White House correspondent. They're not going to ask the right questions.
Yeah, I mean, all these folks that involve. It's like our government tries to put their hand into the business of a woman's womb. Okay, now they're putting their hands into the poor, and keep their hands to themselves.
Huh. Well, all right, I got to take another call. Thanks for calling, Steve.
Thank you, Fred. Bye bye.
Who do we have? Howard from Manhattan. You're on, Howard.
Yeah, hi. Excuse me. Thanks for taking the call.
Yeah.
I certainly agree with the previous caller. Let me tell you what infuriates me. So for the last 10 or so years, we elect all these officials, all these campaigns, and for the last 10 years, the place gets worse, not better. So we don't elect people to make America worse. We elect them to make it better. And but here's what gets me. With this, let's take this change CPI or take the gun situation, the assault weapons. We needed a Martin Luther King. We needed Abraham Lincoln. I joined Move On. You get nothing done. Somebody should call for rallies for the gun, for the assault weapons ban of 2 million people. We can't do it. Martin Luther King could have done it. Senator Bernie Sanders, who I think is probably one of the best guys there, one of the real powerful leaders with an image, should call for these hundreds of thousands of people. Why don't they? Why does every congressman and senator I hear on the radio, why do they turn around and say, I leave it to you? No, we voted you. You're supposed to do it. Don't turn around and tell me to do it. You call, for a sit-in or a march on for 1 million people. I don't get it.
Yeah, well, that makes two of us. I mean, they should be doing this, and they don't. I don't understand it either. I really don't.
I mean, at all.
Well, the people, when you talk about somebody like Martin Luther King, you're talking about somebody who is outside of government. He did not have an office to lose.
Well, an office to lose is not why they have been elected. They're supposed to make America better. So now the cry is by all of the politicians, but we can't do it because we have an office to lose. I didn't know why that's why we elected them.
Well, now you know. Let me take one more. I'm going to take one more call.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks for your time. Buddy.
Sure. Who do we have?
Jeremy from Georgia.
Jeremy from Georgia. You got about 2 minutes, Jeremy.
All right. Hey, how you doing today?
Hey. All right.
Hey, real quickly, to touch on the Martin Luther King point, that's what I wanted to bring up. He did a sermon once where he talked about how the world is interconnected. How you basically reach for a bar of soap. It came from a Frenchman. You have a cup of coffee in the morning. That came from South America. Or if you want tea, that came from China. You know, we're all interconnected in this world. He was saying that back when he was alive.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, that's what it is. People have gotten away. You know, I heard someone say this about the McCarthy era. You know, McCarthy basically dehumanized his targets. It's almost that art of war thing going on. Dehumanize your target, make them seem less than human. Therefore, you can take the emotion out of it. You know, when you pull a gun on a little kid and, you know, decide to pull the trigger because they're nothing to you. And that's what has happened up there in Washington. The people up there don't understand that, number one, you are a public servant. Even the president is a public servant. You are there to serve the people. Now, they've decided in their minds that corporations and all those things are people. No, they're not. You are there for the smallest individual. You are there to fight for the person who doesn't, you know, can't swing. You're there to fight for the disabled. You're there to fight for the weakest people. And they, like you said, they worry about that office too much. Sometimes being in a position of authority comes with great sacrifice.
Well,
Martin Luther King said, I may not get there with you, but we're going to the promised land.
Well, let me ask you this question, and I agree with you completely. You stated the case perfectly. So here's the question, and we only got a few seconds left. Is what you say is right. How do you get them to understand that?
By voting them out of there. I mean, it's just as simple. Take it back to what it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be a truck driver from Georgia or a nurse from Kansas. Those were supposed to be the people that went to the House of Representatives and you know, did things into the Senate. But we're starting to elect all these career politicians, and that's what's messing it up. Because all they're there for is to get elected again.
Well, that includes obviously includes
the welfare recipients, you ask me.
That's true. That's true. They're the ones who live up the nanny state more than anybody.
Exactly.
All right.
You work 36 hours, you get pension for life. Really?
I know. It's just astounding. I mean, anyhow, I got to go. We're at the end of the hour.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for calling. All right, that's it for this hour. We'll be back after 7 o'clock. Feel free to call. This is the Social Security thing we're talking about is absolutely astounding. It's not a shock, but it's a pretty horrible thing. And if we don't pile on them and make them do the right thing, it's our fault. Okay, we're on here again. This is Mike Fader, Sirius XM Left 127. If you're a new listener or if you're somebody who's heard this a million times, I'll tell you again. Want to get in touch with me, go to my website, Faderfiles, FEDERFILES.com. FEDERFILES.com. You can join my mailing list if you're there. I send out not regular, but somewhat frequent essays on politics, sometimes just on personal things, which reflect on everything that we go through, life, death, marriage, children, culture, whatever, devices, technology. But you can be on the list. Also, when you go to the website, you can check and see what else I do on the radio. You can see some great old. You can listen to some great old radio shows. You can check out some books I wrote, other essays that I've written, and also you want to check out on a regular basis a Facebook page that I set up called Occupied Territory, about how the rich and corporations have occupied our court system, and our Congress, and the White House, and the rest of our lives. Occupied Territory on Facebook. So check in there, and you can like that page if you actually like that page. One of the big major stories, I don't know if it came over the major networks because I never listened to them for the last 20 years, but one of the major stories that's come out that any responsible news source had to cover, and most did, was that there was a gigantic, as a multi-year investigation, I should say, by dozens and dozens of reporters all over the world. And it's part of an organization. I forget if it's listed here. Yes. A group called the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, a Washington-based group who I'll try to have on here, along with affiliated news media organizations, announced the other day that after years of investigation, they came up with, and this is also, they came up with something based on a leak of documents. Somebody, somewhere, in some centralized way, or as an accumulation of leaked documents, which was 160 times the size of WikiLeaks. So we're talking about something like, 10 million files of documents were leaked to this group of reporters. And this has been on the front pages and all over the internet and every place. It says here, data leak shakes notion of secret offshore havens and possibly nerves. The New York Times did not put it on the front page because they have a very bad idea of what the priorities for average people are. But basically what happened was the other day, this group of reporters who's been following this up and verifying it said that there was a leak of documents. Somebody on the inside somewhere, or a group of people, leaked documents that showed that tens of thousands of millionaires and billionaires all over the world in every country, including, they have names too, names of people, including 4,000 very, very wealthy Americans, have hundreds of billions of dollars in offshore accounts. Now, everybody always suspected this, and people are pretty sure about it. I mean, even Romney, admitted that he had. But now, the names, the dates, the places of the companies, the amounts of money, and the actual names of the people have been leaked, and it's affecting things automatically all over the world, especially in places where they have a real democracy, not like in this country. For instance, in European countries where they have imposed outrageous austerity measures on people in Greece, in Portugal, in Spain, in Germany, even in other places, in Germany being a more successful financial society right now, they've had to shove this austerity down the throats of hundreds of millions of people in Europe. And people have been saying, but what about all these rich people? They evade their taxes, they don't pay enough, just like here. But over there, these people are going to have to work much, much longer. They're going to have to work longer hours. They're going to have to work way into their 70s or something, and they're going to get less pay for it. Life is much, much harder for them over there than it was before, and much harder than it should be for people who have to work for a living on this hard planet Earth. And now the proof is here, and I'm just waiting for this list of 4,000 American names to see exactly who these people are, how much money they're hiding over there. What does this mean? This means that hundreds of billions of dollars in total wealth that these people stole or made, none of them actually did anything decent in the world, but that they stole or made. Oh, I expand that a little bit. It included in America apparently some dentists and doctors. What a shock, right? Anyhow, that's the lowest level. These people have hidden hundreds of billions of dollars, which should be taxed in Germany, in Spain, even in Russia, in Belgium, in the United States, in Canada, you name it. People from something like 40 countries have hidden like $1 trillion overseas. If this money was taxed and they paid their taxes in the countries they live in, if they didn't evade taxes, which should be against the law, which is against the law, then we wouldn't have to be having a bunch of rich people in Washington even thinking out loud that they could steal money out of the pockets and the bank accounts of old, sick, disabled people and veterans and the middle class. It's gone too far. It's gone too far. Personally, the way I see it is that unless there's an actual revolution in some of these other countries, and maybe even in this country, if there isn't an actual uprising, a revolt, you could say it should be starting out as civil disobedience if you want, and maybe it should be, because who wants to see a lot of dead people? But in the end, this is what has happened throughout history. And it was in monarchies that it usually happened. That in the French Revolution in 1789, for centuries and centuries, a handful of people, the 1% you could call them, to make it resonate with what's happening right now in our country. And this was repeated in Russia, in Germany, in England, but for centuries, and in France it was as bad as it could possibly be. A handful of people, a handful of useless nitwits, of human warts, had all the money, all the land, and 99% of the people there had nothing. They lived in mud huts. They lived in straw-thatched roofed houses where they died at the age of 30 from pneumonia. Their children starved in the streets. It happened in Russia. People were starving to death. And a few people owned everything. They had everything. And not only did they have everything, and people were dying in thousands all around them, starving to death every day, and this has happened in many countries in history and many times, they were throwing lavish parties at the same moment that this was happening. And finally, people said, you know what? Enough is enough. And they picked up pitchforks and knives and swords and guns And they killed these people, and they took back the land, and they took back the money that should have been theirs for all the sweat and the labor they put in. I'm not saying that that should happen in this country or it should happen in some other countries, but I think we're headed straight for that. If there aren't reforms in the way people treat each other, if we continue to allow all over the world and in this country, because this is where I live, if we continue to allow the rich to rob and steal, to own our government, to corrupt our government, if we continue to allow this, we will all live more and more miserable lives all the time. We'll have less and less. We'll all get to be older, and it's happening right now with this sleazy, lying son of a bitch Obama in Washington, going back on a campaign promise to the old, to the sick, to disabled. There is no words bad enough for this man. No words bad enough to describe this lying son of a bitch. And I don't know why he's doing it. I don't care why he's doing it. He's a rich man. The people in Congress, 2/3 of them are millionaires. If we let them get away with this, one way or another, however we have to stop it, then we're going to have to live in our own mess because it's partially our own problem. It has come to the point all over the world and here where these rich people can get away with anything. They bribe their own governments. They evade taxes, they steal, they lie, they manipulate governments, and they laugh themselves sick over the fact that they have a president and Congress or a parliament or a prime minister in another country that continue to impose more and more restrictions and hardships on the backbone of society. That is to say, most of the people who live in it. How long can it go on before there is actual rivers of blood running in the streets? I don't want to see it, but I don't see any other end to it. And I'm not a neophyte with this. I'm not ignorant about history. I've seen it. I've read about it. It's going to happen. You can't keep doing this forever to people. What we have in this country, I mentioned before, there are 8 people, the 2 Koch brothers, the 5, heirs to the Walton fortune, and Michael Bloomberg, just those 8 people, and I could mention 30 or 50 more people, but just those 8 human beings in this country have assets of $180 billion, which is $60 billion more than these little Social Security cuts, which will make everybody's lives miserable, will save in 10 years. This is what I think we should do. I think as a country, we can pass laws. This is a majority rules country, right? I don't think that anybody should have over $10 million, period. I don't care how much money anybody has. Nobody should have over $10 million. We live in a world where we're all together. This planet is like a boat in an ocean of space. We're all in the same boat. We can't have some people crowding 99% of the people in this boat to one small corner of the boat and tossing them a breadcrumb to share among themselves while they sit at the other end in cushioned chairs and eat cake. We can't have this anymore. And if we can't get them to understand this by voting and by talking to them or by organizing or by doing all the things that a democracy and a civilization generally asks for, then there's going to have to be another way to get it from them. I would pass a law. I would propose a law and have it signed by the president, maybe bringing some really serious pressure on them, and I'm not suggesting what kind that would be, that nobody in this country could have over $10 million. If those 8 people I just mentioned only were limited to $10 million, we would have $180 billion. We would have $180 billion that we could share for the rest of us so that we wouldn't have to cut Social Security. We could raise it so we could hire back all the teachers, so we wouldn't have to sell the post offices, so we wouldn't have to lay off firemen and cops, so we could build roads that are broken and bridges that don't work where people die on them because they swerve off them because of the handrails don't work after 50 years, the guardrails. The average American family, and the average American family is a single old person who's 78, who lives in an apartment somewhere, a man and a woman in their 30s somewhere, let's say in the Middle West, both of whom have jobs and an office and they have a kid. The average American family, which comes in many shapes and sizes and ages, makes $47,000 a year. The price of food, clothing, gasoline, utilities, shelter, everything, rent, everything goes through the roof all the time. It never goes down. It never goes down. It goes up. It goes up. And the average American family makes $47,000 a year. They could never pay for college. They could never get a new house. They could never even hardly get by on what they're making. And yet 8 people have $180 billion. It can't go on. I would limit people to $10 million, and that's being generous. I'm just being generous. Imagine we would have $500 billion. We would solve all of our budget problems. And you know what? Eminent domain is used by the United States government and states and cities all the time. In Texas, the state of Texas uses eminent domain, the power of the government, to seize property because the XL pipeline people wanted to lay pipe across some people's ranches, small ranches I'm talking about, not like gigantic cattle ranches, small ranches, small farms, and they just said, we need to put the XL pipeline here. And these people, so then they said to these people, here's money for your property, right? And it was very little money. And these people had these places for generations. This is how they make a living. The money was useless to them. They're not going to be able to live off that or do anything with it. They said, no thanks. We'll live here where our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents lived, and we'll do what we know how to do and what we love to do, even if we're not making much money at it. The state of Texas, bribed by the XL pipeline people, Exxon, whoever else is building this, who's going to send their oil through it, or Halliburton, whoever the fuck it is. They bribed the people in Texas, which has a notoriously corrupt, right up there with New York State, in winning the gold medal in the Olympics and the silver medal for corruption of state governments. They bribed these people to seize the property of people who have been there for generations on ranches and farms and who own, property. They take their property away. Well, I say use eminent domain to seize a major network television station like a channel or a system like CBS or NBC or ABC. Just seize it and declare it for the good of the people, eminent domain. Just take it away from the American Broadcasting Company or whoever owns it. General Electric owns Channel 2, is it? Take it away from them. And so when people run for office in this country, they can use that channel for free because the government, that is to say we, me and you, the citizens of the United States, we own that channel now. And it's in 5,000 places and towns and cities all over the country. It's free. And the politicians, if they want to run for office, they have to use that channel in all the local affiliates. And they don't have to spend a dime. They won't be bribed. They don't need to be bribed by corporations and by rich donors because they'll have a free channel. Seize a major cable channel from GE or ever some other company that owns it, Comcast or something. Just seize it. Eminent domain of the American people. Then they can get on and have debates there. They can have presidential debates, and they can make their statements about their campaign right down to the local guy who's running for dog catcher. Just seize it. Take it away from them. And by the way, since we have laws that put people who have a couple ounces of marijuana in a federal prison or a state prison for 10 or 15 or 20 years, what we should do is enforce real laws for the good of people. If there's somebody in a bank who has destroyed somebody's life or ruined a pension fund, they need to go to jail for 25 years. If somebody did insider trading and put in jeopardy tens of thousands of people who invested in pension funds or in a stock, they need to go to jail for 25 years. I'm talking about a minimum sentence. You do not get out until you serve 25 years. And I don't mean in some country club either. If there's been an oil spill and you're the president of an oil company or the executive of an oil company and you knew better, you go to jail for 25 years. If there's a medicine that causes people to die from side effects because you bribed the FDA or you bribed some Congress people with campaign donations to cut the FDA or cut the EPA, if you bribe somebody and you're a chemical company like Monsanto or you're a large pharmaceutical company and there's a toxic spill or some medicine that was rushed through and people die from side effects, the top 50 people in the company have to go to jail for 25 years. It's about time to get serious. Is this our country or is it their country? We have allowed a French monarchy type system to take over in this country. They are saying let them eat cake when people can't even afford to eat bread. And this fucking son of a bitch Obama gets up and says, the first Democratic president in history since Franklin Roosevelt, the first Democratic president in history to get up and say he is willing to give away the already negligible, pitiful amount of money. He's willing to give away a portion of it to make a bunch of other rich asshole Republicans happy. This man is either bribed and bought or demented in some way I don't understand. But he always wanted to set history. He always wanted to go down in history, this president. Well, in some ways he has. And here's another way he's gone down in history. He is now the first Democratic president since Franklin Roosevelt, since the time of Franklin Roosevelt, to actually propose cutting the benefits of tens of millions of people, the people who can least afford it. He should be ashamed of himself. He should get up and apologize for even suggesting that, and yet here he is proposing it. It's unbelievable to me. It's unbelievable. Anyhow. If you want to call and talk about anything that's going on, feel free to do it. These two stories were next to each other, right next to each other on the front page of the paper the other day. They discovered that there are tens of thousands of the richest people in the world are hiding something like $1 trillion worth of money, which would be taxable money overseas. Well, people in this country have to get their Social Security reduced. In Germany, they have to work longer hours at harder jobs and get less benefits. Austerity all over the world, and these people, these rich people, hide this money, and the governments of various parts of the world let them get away with it. Walk in, take the money out of the banks in the Virgin Islands, in the Cayman Islands, in Cyprus, and everywhere else that belongs to these rich people. Take their money by eminent domain, leave them with their yacht, leave them with their mansion, and use this money to relieve the austerity that people are suffering under. This trouble and pain and suffering and misery and death and homelessness and going hungry does not have to be. This is not some natural disaster. This is a man-made disaster by the rich. Fuck the rich. We need to take their money away, one way or the other. Okay. Number here is 866-997-4748. In case anybody's listening in the Homeland Security Department or the FBI, the last name is spelled Feder. I just want you to get it right. Thank you. Okay, 866-997-4748. What do we have? Is it Ray? Greg from Pittsburgh, you're on.
Hey, it's Greg. How you doing, Mike?
Hey.
Hey, I was kind of, tickled when the Republicans was making such a big deal about the Obama kids taking these vacations. But since this shit didn't come out, it's amazing how he can send his kids to the resort to then cut all of our benefits. I mean, this guy. I hope now that everybody can see that he's no different than a Republican. He's no different.
2 weeks ago, he was playing golf at an exclusive golf club down in Florida with some of the richest people in this country. Who is this man? Who is this man?
With Tiger Woods. I think he's with Tiger Woods.
Yeah, but he was with billionaires at a private golf club. Who is this guy?
In the black community, we have a word, a phrase for him. He is a field nigga. He wants to be in the club. He cannot run again. He'll probably never be another politician. He wants to be in the club, and he's going to make the deals to be in the club so he can get patted on the head and he can get invited to the parties. And I'm telling you, it's no different. And I don't know if,
you know what? Those are hard words to say and hard words to hear. But I don't think you're so far off.
Yeah, that's real, man.
This guy.
The black community is so small.
Yeah.
And the Hispanic community, we don't even know where they stand. But I'm telling you, the poor whites and middle class whites in America, they gotta stand up. They have to help us. They need to stop going out and buying these F-150s and these damn Harley Davidsons and get off this reality television and realize what's going on.
Yeah, they also need to get past this bullshit about abortions and guns and understand that they're being screwed by the federal government,
Every day, that's all.
And I don't mean because of their guns and their stupid sexual mores. I'm talking about what they live on, how they get money for work,
Exactly, and it's as if they I don't know if they still believe that the rich is gonna open the door and invite them in when it gets tough. That's how they act. They act like when it really gets tough out here, my rich boss, he's gonna open the door up and he's gonna give me more money.
Well, I don't know why they would believe that, because the whole point of the Republican Party these days, their whole slogan is, "You're all on your own. We all have to earn it for ourselves, and we're not going to take care of you." So I don't know why they'd believe that.
But they still do, because like Obama, it's like inclusion into this elite club. And if I vote against any black man, if I stand strong against abortion, if I hate gays, then the rich people won't like me. And it seems like it's that simple. And it's like they don't get it. They don't care.
With him sometimes
that their boss is giving up any raises or giving better benefits.
No.
All they're doing is cutting.
And they get put into kind of a hypnotic trance by these side issues about guns and abortions. Those aren't the real issues. The real issue is income inequality and the fact that people are working harder than they ever did, getting less for it. And that's what the problem is,
Yeah, I mean, and then this whole thing about, like you said, with the guns, thinking that they're going to defend themselves against the Americans.
Oh, please.
I was reading an article. They have a laser that can hit a target 60 miles away. So you think you and your SR, whatever you got, is going to protect you against the government? You're crazy.
You know what? Here's an article that was, I don't have it in front of me. I'm just quote from it. There was an article, and this is good for somebody who's supposed to be liberal or left like me. It's always good to quote from a conservative or corporate source. Forbes magazine, and I mentioned this a couple of times. Forbes magazine wrote an article only 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it was quoted by a lot of other people. They found out by their reporting that in 2011, the Homeland Security Department purchased 1.6 billion rounds of rifle ammunition. Now, why would they do that?
Because they're getting ready.
Well, you know what? If they're getting ready, we need to get ready, because it's come down to that.
And I'm telling you something. That list about all these billionaires and billionaires who have their money offshore, if it really comes out, Obama's ass is going to be on that list. He's going to be on. I'm telling you, he's going to be on that list.
Oh, you think Obama's going to be? I don't think he's that far gone.
Hey, I'm telling you.
Well, you know what'll happen. You know what he'll say? He'll say, "Hey, I gave my money to Frank in Chicago. I didn't know what he was going to do with it."
Exactly, the same thing he's saying now.
Yeah.
I just heard his speech on the AP talking. He's making his argument like he's doing what's best, and if he doesn't do this, all hell's going to break loose. And I mean, it's like he's. I don't even understand how other Democrats can stand next to that guy. I
don't know. He is a shameful man. He really is. All right, I gotta move on.
All right, take care, Mike.
All right, take care. Who do we got? Rob from New Jersey. You're on.
Hey, how you doing, Mike?
Hey.
Good. I heard you before on the Hardman show, but it's good to speak to you now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was just thinking. I said, I'm a truck driver, so I figured the best way to go about fixing something like this is maybe they shouldn't have any deliveries in Washington, D.C. Maybe if all the truck drivers just said, well, you know what, I'm not going to take no food, no water, no building products, no nothing. And turn Washington over on his head and stop there or something, because I don't think they'd be able to get into any building because of the people protesting.
Well, you know what? The trouble with that, of course, is the usual, is that a lot of poor people would suffer.
You're right. That is a problem. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Drastic things call for drastic measures.
Well, that's sometimes how it goes. A lot of times people get pissed off when people sit down in the middle of the road because they're objecting to some, intrusion or some, predatory behavior by government or corporation. So they just stop traffic. So what happens is a lot of commuters get pissed off at the people sitting in the road, and they don't go for the real source of the problem.
Yeah, well, it's more real to people when they actually see something than just to hear it, whether it be on the radio or whether it be from some news person on TV.
Mm-hmm.
When they actually see it, they can actually feel exactly what's going on.
Well, that's why
that makes things change.
Yeah, I agree, and that's why I think probably since we're talking about Social Security, that maybe we could find a few 100,000 people or maybe 1 million people maybe a month or two from now to get it organized, to go down to Washington while they're in session and not off on some campaign-raising jaunt, and actually put it in their faces. Here's 1 million people. We're not going to have any money. You better change your mind quick.
Yeah, and something has to go on fast because, I mean, it just seems like, I don't know, maybe I just feel this way, but it just seems like on Wednesday he's going to put this budget forward and it's just going to go through. You know what I mean?
I got a feeling that you're right. I got a feeling that this budget is going to go through. But on the other hand, this guest I had on before, he believes in the system. He believes that people should work through the normal political channels. In other words, flood Congress. Forget about the president. He's lost. He's a lost soul. But flood the House of Representatives and the Senate with calls from people in their own district. Flood them, show up at their offices, maybe go down to Washington, call, sign petitions, get them to understand that tens of millions of people will not put up with this.
That's right. That is the thing to do. But in the meantime, we can't stop the trucks, though, right?
Well, I don't know. You don't show up with food deliveries in Washington. You think that's going to bother the Senate or the president? No, it's not.
Well, yeah, you're right. I mean, it is going to go directly to the people, but you know what I mean. And if you put them all together, they probably make up almost 1 million.
Well, that's true. Maybe the people get, upset enough because they're not getting the deliveries. They'll pin it on the people who can't. You just got to watch out they don't pin it on the truck drivers.
Yeah, well, they will do that. They will do that to us. But, it's hard to get people to gather in a place because they all have to go home.
Yeah.
Somehow. You know what I mean? But if home is across the street, it's a little bit easier for you to come outside and say something.
Well, that's true. I got to move on, take another call.
All right, thanks a lot, man.
Okay. Who do we have? Lori in Florida. Lori in Florida, you're on.
Hey, Mike, I totally agree with what you're saying today. I'm so disgusted. And I work in a hospital, and I every day, it's just hard for me to even maintain my compliance with anything because I want to stay. I want to wake them up, and it's like I'm beating my head against the wall. It's no use.
Mm-hmm. Who did you vote for?
Oh, God, I voted for Obama.
Mm-hmm. Lesser of two evils, right?
I don't know. I mean, I just
I don't know either.
that he might get better this time. And
really? You think so? I don't think so. I don't think so. He's getting worse by the minute.
He's worse. I hate his guts now.
Yeah, well, everybody with a decent heart should hate his guts because he's a liar and he's taking money out of the mouths of sick, old, and disabled people now. How low can you go? How low can you go?
I know. I'm disgusted.
Well, you know what? The only thing to do is, as long as we're not all going to actually grab pitchforks and go to Washington, like in the French Revolution, the only thing we can do is what Mr. Kingston suggested earlier is find out exactly who the congressperson is who represents your district and make sure that they hear in no uncertain terms what you think of this proposal to cut Social Security. Make sure they understand that you will do everything you can to ensure that they never get elected to anything again if they so much as agree for a second with this proposal.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I can think that you could do. What else can you do?
I know. I don't know. I mean, I keep telling people and talking, but it's just like I said, it's a brick wall because there's so many Republicans in this state. Mm-hmm. In the state of Florida, and especially where I work, oh my God, they're so brainwashed.
But sooner or later, they're going to have to retire. They're going to need Social Security.
I know.
Oh, well, I don't know.
Well, I love your show. I really do.
Well, I appreciate your calling, and I think maybe Mr. Kingston is right. The only outlet we have right now, if we're not going to take an illegal outlet or, outside of politics, is to call these people up, to go to their offices, maybe demonstrations outside congressional district offices in Florida, Pennsylvania, Iowa, wherever it is. Make sure these people understand that they will never get elected to anything again if they so much as even give the slightest thought of going along with this. I can't believe that he even did it. But now that he's done it, see, there's nothing you can do to this president. He can't be unelected. He's not going to get impeached. And, he's not going to be able to run again. So he can do whatever he wants. And I'm just thinking of all the people who called me when I was talking about Jill Stein and a third party here. And they were talking about, look, when Obama gets in, he's not going to have to run again. And then you'll see the real Obama. Okay, now we see him. Now we see him, They
were right.
But but there's three branches of government, at least in the Constitution. So we have to put the pressure on Congress people. If the Tea Party can do it at a local level, so can people like us, Yeah.
All
right.
I have to say, I think that I'm a trained mental health therapist, and I've always been able to see underneath to the real issues.
Yeah.
And I think you're that kind of person too. And I really don't understand these people that don't see what the real issues are.
Sometimes doesn't it look as if the world is divided into two? A whole bunch of people on one side who don't understand that there's such a thing as an unconscious or psychology, or that we're all connected to each other, and another group on the other side who seem to understand that. It's like two kinds of people, I don't know how one kind actually gets the other kind to understand that we're all in the same boat on the same ocean, surrounded by the same sharks. I don't know. I really don't know. Unless it but you know what happens? In the end, if they actually start not being able to pay their bills and they start actually not, but then they'll have some Republican telling them it's the fault of the immigrants. It's the fault of the welfare state. I don't know how to wake these people up. They just don't get that the bad guys are the rich and the corporations and the people in Congress who they bribe to do what they want. I don't know why it's so simple. I don't know why they don't understand it, but they don't.
I agree.
Anyhow, I got to go sell some who knows what. I don't make these commercials, but they pay for the show. So
okay, thanks a lot.
Okay, we should take a break. Anybody who's on the line, hold on, and we'll go right to your calls after this. Okay, here we are back, and we have a phone call from who? Danette in Georgia.
Hi.
Hi.
I just caught the tail end of the conversation you were having with the last caller, and I wanted to get your take on why she and you were so upset with President Obama suggesting the changes to Social Security. Like, I'm not sure whether I should be upset about it or not, because I've heard logical arguments on both sides. And so I listened you didn't, the whole show tonight was devoted to the whole idea of Social Security, what it's about, why it's such a terrible, shameful thing, what he did in detail. We went over this for 2 hours, but you didn't hear any of that? No, I've been grocery shopping. I just happened to catch the last couple minutes.
There is no need. I try to put this as succinctly as possible. There is no need for this man to stand up and propose cutting one dime out of Social Security, because the people who live on Social Security can hardly afford to live now. There are many, many other ways to raise money without causing hardly anybody any pain in this country. The last person you need to take this money from, food from their mouths, places to live. The average person on Social Security makes $15,000 from Social Security. You know, and I know, that nobody could live on that, or hardly even survive on that. They want to cut more money from millions of old people, sick people, veterans, people who are disabled, and they will not take money from the rich. This is basically what we're talking about. And this president is acting in a shameful manner. And he absolutely promised in his inaugural address in January that he would never take anything away from the old, disabled, the poor, and the sick, and now he's doing it.
Okay, so do you really believe that it's going to pass? Because, I mean, John Boehner and them are saying that they're not willing to pay any more taxes, which is like the sole source of income from our country. So do you think that maybe he's bluffing?
I think he's playing politics. He thinks that he's going to give them something, then they'll look even more like Scrooge than he's acting, and they'll look bad to people. So while they're playing their little political games, they're risking the possibility of millions of people living in even worse misery than they are now. They're all acting in a shameful manner.
Okay. Yeah, well, I agree with that. I just wanted your take on it because I had missed the show.
No, that's how it is. I mean, these people, 2/3 of them are millionaires in Congress, including the president. They make $172,000 to start per year. That's not counting their perks. And they're going to seriously have a discussion about taking away money from people who are old or sick and getting $15,000 a year. They should all be locked up.
Yeah, well, I don't understand. What bothers me is that as citizens, I feel that we're derelict in our duty in understanding who we're voting for. I think a lot of times that's the problem. I mean, how these people could be reelected, especially like at the local level. The senators and the congressmen are the ones that, it's the House that controls the purse strings. And it's one thing for us to be upset with President Obama even considering this, but it's wholly another thing come midterm elections. People stay home. People don't go out and fight for common sense change, and they think that voting the same people in is going to produce a different result. That's what I'm frustrated and disappointed in us as citizens, because it's like we've been dumbed down, and we don't even take the time to go online and look at who we're voting for, who's running in our local elections.
Or for instance,
that stuff is available on the internet.
Yeah, and since you mentioned that, there's a place called Maplight, Maplight, Maplight. Just look up Maplight on Google, which routinely investigates down to the penny where all the campaign money goes to every single congressperson and senator. It's fascinating to see.
Yeah, well, I will check that out.
Maplight, yeah, check it out. It's really great because when they propose some bill, for instance, they slip something into a bill to excuse Monsanto from poisoning people or whatever it is they do. You can go straight to the person who introduced that amendment to the bill and find out that Monsanto gave them $800,000 over the last 10 years in campaign contributions. Then the answer is right there.
Yeah, if we get money out of politics, I think might solve a lot of problems. I watch PBS a lot, and there was a lady named Patsy, and I cannot remember her last name, Patsy Mink, and she's from Hawaii. She fought for, during like the 60s and 70s and the 80s. She died in like 2002 or something like that. But she worked really hard to have like the Title X legislation and Title IX and all those different things.
Oh, yeah, I remember her. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just don't understand why we, as a community, why we don't support people like that anymore. Do you know what I mean? President Obama may be a jerk for even suggesting this, but the problem is so much bigger than him. And I just really feel like we need to do a better job of vetting who we're voting for. And we just don't. And all of this is our own fault.
Well, not all of it, but a lot of it is. Part of the problem is there's only two political parties that anybody will vote for, which is why I always vote third party now.
Uh-huh.
That's what I say. Vote for Jill Stein, vote for Rocky Anderson. Don't vote for these people anymore. Unless you've got somebody like Bernie Sanders or somebody like Alan Grayson, don't waste your vote. You're just voting for a corporate state. I have to move on.
Thank you. Have a great night.
You too. Who do we have? Billy from Texas. You're on.
Afternoon, Mike. Listen, it is doing my heart really good today to hear you talk about Obama being such a son of a bitch. When I hear a liberal like you say those kind of words, it makes my heart flutter, I got to tell you, because what it illustrates is something that I've known for a long time, that a true Marxist like Obama doesn't care about the little people either.
Whoa. A Marxist? Do you think that this corporate tool is a Marxist? What world do you live in? Do you know what Marxism is?
Of course I do.
Okay, so how do you figure that a multimillionaire who's going to take the food out of the mouths of people who make $15,000 a year, how is he a Marxist?
The people that run the Marxist governments, to back up a minute, he is a social democrat. A social democrat is a Marxist.
And where do you get that from? How is he a Marxist?
Well, Marxism...
No. How is Obama a Marxist?
He's a social democrat.
Can you stop repeating the same thing like a parrot who didn't get any food? Can you explain yourself?
Just screaming at people and learn your history.
Tell me how he's a social democrat. How is he a social democrat?
A social democrat believes that you achieve social sins through democratic means, i.e. the ballot box. And that's exactly what Obama is.
Say it again so I can understand it in English.
In English, a social democrat is somebody who is a Marxist who believes that you can achieve a socialist agenda through the ballot box.
Now, but let me ask you the question again one last time. How is he a Marxist?
Because he believes in redistribution of wealth.
He believes in the redistribution of wealth. He just got up the other day and announced that he wants to cut Social Security for tens of millions of people who have almost nothing, and he wants to do that in the face of practically not raising taxes on the rich at all. That is the opposite of a Marxist. He is a supreme capitalist.
No, that's totally wrong.
Cut this guy off. He's too stupid for me to talk to. Let's go and move on. I can't deal with it. I can't stand stupidity anymore. It offends me. It hurts my stomach. Do you have any Mylanta? Don't give me da. Unbelievable. Obama, a Marxist? Now I'm seeing purple elephants come out of the computer here. That makes as much sense. Unfortunately, I do see that. So maybe Obama is a Marxist. Who do we have? Randy in North Carolina. Jesus Christ, stupidity. Unbelievable stupidity. Randy, I'm not talking about you. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, Mike, love your show. I understand. And listen, I have been voted for Democrats since they stole that election for Jimmy Carter. And last election, I voted for Roseanne Barr.
For who?
So, Roseanne Barr.
Oh, Roseanne Barr? Yeah, okay.
But I'm just calling to say I love your show and everything, and it kind of reminds me, I don't know how you're going to take it, but it kind of reminds me of the movie Mars Attack. Maybe we need some Martians to come down here and blow up Congress in that scene, but
yeah, you know what? I don't want to get on here and advocate direct violent action against the government. I really don't want to do that. I believe in what Gandhi did. I believe in what Martin Luther King did. We're not even doing that in this country. We need millions of people to take to the streets to stop the machinery that's crushing us. I don't believe in attacking them. I mean, I'm saying that this has happened in history. If you don't have a mass of people like in the 60s with Martin Luther King or like Gandhi did in the 30s and 40s in India, if you don't have millions of people just sitting in front of factories, sitting in front of Goldman Sachs, sitting in front of the government buildings, don't allow them to move their Homeland Security tanks to local police departments. If you stop the whole thing by using people's bodies, and people are going to have to pay the price for that, if you don't allow people to do that, and people don't do that, the next step is either going to be utter repression or revolution. It's the way of the world.
Yeah, you're right, and I wish the people should have understood that back then when he turned his back on Reverend Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton way back then when he first got elected. This is a shame, and I hope in my lifetime, in our lifetime, that we do see a change in Congress. But as long as money is portrayed as God, I don't think it's ever going to happen.
That's why what I'd like to see is a bill in Congress which either creates a new national network TV station or a national network radio station or both, which is owned by the people of the United States. It's just there, like C-SPAN. It's only there for when we have elections. And then every candidate, because it'll have 5,000 or 10,000 stations, radio and TV, the government owns it, you understand, right? Or they just seize it from ABC or CBS, and they have 5,000, 10,000 affiliates. Every local candidate, every congressional candidate, every state candidate, every person running for president goes on that station, has as much time as they want for campaigning. They have debate time, and not one dime of corporate or rich person's money is involved. That would begin to solve the problem.
Yeah, you're right, and I hope we could just stop being so jealous of one another. The definition people think like the definition of rich. My definition of rich is when the money works for you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know what I'm saying? And some people just think that, yeah, they're making six figures, that they're rich. No, that's not the case. It's just too much jealousy. That's what I mean. Just too much jealousy in this country, in the world, and I just hope it changes. You know.
All right. Okay.
Maybe it do take balance to end it, but
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have anybody else?
Yeah, we got, let's try Jim from Louisiana.
Jim from Louisiana. You got about 2 minutes, then the show's over. Go ahead.
All right. Well, no, this is kind of, I just got to go back to Orwellian in, 1984, where Winston Smith's job was just, I remember there's that scene in the book, or that passage, where he's basically dropping the chocolate rations to make Big Brother look good, and it's just like in animal form, where all the animals are equal, only some are more equal. And then I'll throw in Brave New World. I need some Somna.
That's Brave New World. Yeah. So you covered all the best prophetic political books there are. People should read these things. I mean, it would wake people up. They should teach it in school. Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, and almost anything by Orwell, especially Animal Farm, which is really good because he doesn't spare, communist or Marxist governments either. His attitude is that real equality is an extremely difficult thing to achieve, and you always have to watch out for the bullies taking over anything, whether they're Marxists or capitalists.
Real quick, I'll just throw in real quick. Also, he had an essay on language.
Mm-hmm.
I read it a long time ago. I haven't read it, but it's basically, it's kind of like, it sounds like a platform or what he was leading to in 1984 with the double speak and, war is peace, love is hate.
Oh yeah, I mean, he was a genius, Orwell. Orwell was a genius and a really good writer, and people should read him. They should teach it in school. Aldous Huxley and George Orwell. Can't go wrong. The whole country would be better off. I got to go now.
All right. Thanks a lot. Great show.
Yeah, thanks for calling in. Absolutely. Aldous Huxley, Brave New World, predicted everything that's going on now, right down to the drugging of America. Everybody's taking antidepressants and everybody is taking illegal drugs and legal drugs. Hundreds of billions of prescriptions every year to keep everybody's brains addled so we don't even know who the bad guys are. We can't tell the good guys from the bad guys. And then you get a guy like this idiot from Texas, this man who's got the brain of a dead frog, telling me that Obama is a Marxist. It leaves me speechless. And if anything could leave me speechless, it's pretty bad. So our musical director will soon take over, and as soon as he prepares himself. And I am going to leave you for now. Don't forget to go to Fader Files, FEDERFILES.com. Check out whatever else I do on the radio, and you can listen there. Also, I have written a couple of books. I'm in the process of revising, and I'm almost done with revising the first book I wrote. It's a great book of short stories. Soon, I will be mentioning it to you because it will be out somewhere where you can read it. And right away, take it away.
Well, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. That's my story.
Ed Schultz on Sirius XM Left.
We are fixated with failure. Lindsey Graham is fixated with failure. 90% isn't enough for him. And some of these other jugheads, Ted Cruz, and they have been fixated with failure on job creation because they wanted to see President Obama fail. They have been fixated on destroying labor in this country, and they have greased the skids for corporations to do whatever they want to do when it comes to crapping on the world.
The Ed Schultz Show, weekdays at noon East, 9 West on Sirius XM Left, 127.
Attention men, the miracle blue pill that started it all for treating ED is now available in generic form without the high pharmacy prices. That's right, the one millions of men depend on is